Chapter 3:18. But it was a pity that in Andre's eyes, this was barely passable. Compared to the scheming Beatrice cheese he met in his previous life, Cecilia was still a far cry. Moreover, this so-called sexy dress was only in comparison to the conservative noble attire of Linton City. If she wanted to seduce him, she'd better strip naked and change into a set of sexy lingerie first. Of course, as a self-proclaimed gentleman, Andre wouldn't say these words aloud. He only labeled her as a scheming Beatrice TCH in his heart and modestly waved his hand. No, Miss Cecilia, you think too highly of me. These three things aren't as exaggerated as the rumors outside. The truth has long been changed beyond recognition by the rumors and is simply not credible. Saying so, Andre's face revealed a trace of a bitter smile. Since Bonnie had set up the framework of the intelligence system early on, he was now able to obtain a lot of timely information. Although it wasn't possible to pry into the secrets of the nobles, it was still very easy to collect some rumors from the marketplace. What did Andre look like in the eyes of the commoners of Linton City? 8 feet tall, 8 feet around the waist. His appearance was as ferocious as an ogre. He could tear a person in half with a raise of his hand. The flames from his mouth could melt rocks, and he had to eat the hearts of 20 living people every day. It could be said that he was completely demonized. It would be strange if he wasn't oppressed. However, he knew that in the eyes of the commoners, all mages were more or less the same. If they weren't ferocious devils, then they were man-eating monsters. In short, from those ridiculous descriptions, you would never find a single characteristic that a human should have. From a certain perspective, this reflected the position and impression of mages in the hearts of the commoners. They were terrifying, dangerous, and ruthless. Regarding this, Andre didn't have any good ideas. He could only let them be. After all, he was also a member of the Mage Association. Those ignorant commoners don't understand how great your actions are. Don't worry. I heard that the council has already sent out 2 traveling bards to organize your deeds and spread them everywhere. When the time comes, all the rumors will be dispelled. Cecilia was quite familiar with these matters. She pursed her lips and snickered as she comforted him. Andre shrugged nonchalantly. Forget it, I don't have any hope. Let nature take its course. He was very clear that this was the council's way of fawning over him after discovering his potion-making skills to make up for their slight disdain. As for whether it would have any effect, it would depend on the will of the heavens. After all, in any era, preconceived notions weren't that easy to change. Especially with the fact that there were only 2 traveling bards, it wouldn't have too many effects. Seeing that Andre didn't want to continue on this topic, Cecilia quickly changed the topic. She pretended to be naive and asked, I'm curious, why are you wearing a hood? Is it to block the sun? All right, Cecilia, let Mage Andre rest for a while. Don't you see that he's a little tired? Virginia used her cane to lightly tap her daughter's calf, pretending to be angry as she scolded. Looking at the father and daughter sitting opposite him, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly. A playful smile appeared on his face. He thought to himself, as the saying goes, one who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. Your foxtail has finally shown itself. As expected, you're here for the fire elemental bloodline. From the moment they met, he felt that they had a strong intention, especially the father, Virginia. His 2 eyes were looking up and down as if he was looking for something. Without a doubt, this guy must have gotten the information from a mage, so he specially came today to test whether it was true or not. Usually, the nobles were very suspicious. They would usually verify the information they got from others, or else they wouldn't completely believe it. Since he already knew the motive of the other party, Andre was completely relieved. He was already prepared to deal with this situation, so he was exceptionally calm. He directly took off his hood, revealing his flame-like hair and 2 orange-red eyes in front of the other 2. Especially the dense fire elemental energy gathered around his hair. It was like sparks flashing in the air, looking so dazzling. Oh, my God. What Wizard Zebulon said was absolutely right. This is unbelievable. It's like a ball of bright flame. Virginia's eyes widened as she let out an incoherent exclamation. He didn't expect that he would get the answer he wanted the most, just as he was testing the waters with the strategy that he had formulated. After all, hearing about it was one thing, and seeing it with one's own eyes was another. The special bloodline of their dreams was right in front of them, so any noble would inevitably be excited. Not only did it represent a powerful supernatural power, it also meant that once they got their hands on it, their family could very well experience a qualitative leap. In fact, although there were many types of special bloodlines, there weren't many that were really suitable for the upper-class society. Needless to say, bloodlines like demons and devils that were feared and detested by ordinary people, even the mixed-blood descendants of evil dragons like red dragons, blue dragons, green dragons, black dragons, and white dragons would be rejected to a certain extent. Only the dragons of the good faction, such as the gold dragon, silver dragon, bronze dragon, brass dragon, and red bronze dragon, as well as the fire elemental, earth elemental, wind elemental, and water elemental of the neutral faction, could be accepted by the majority of the people. However, the number of these bloodlines was extremely small. Needless to say, the metal dragons would carefully hide their identities when they entered human society, let alone fall in love and have mixed blood descendants. As for the elemental realm, there was no need to mention it. Ever since the High God had sealed the connection between Orire and the other planes, the powerful elemental lords could no longer pass through the planar passage like before and descend their consciousness or projections. Therefore, it was completely impossible to transform into an elemental or half-elemental body with their help. As time passed, most of the families with elemental bloodlines slowly faded into the masses, completely disappearing in the long river of history. Take Andre's family, for example. The bloodline in their bodies was so thin that it was almost negligible. Apart from retaining some physical characteristics, such as the color of their hair, they were basically no different from the commoners. Of course, things would be different after they were activated. At least it would ensure that the bloodline would not disappear for 2 generations, which was why the nobles were so enthusiastic. Chapter 319. After the excitement, Virginia immediately realized that her behavior was a little inappropriate. She quickly suppressed the excitement in her heart and bowed with one hand on her chest. "I'm very sorry. I was a little rude just now. I believe you should know that it has been a long time since a special bloodline appeared in Linden City. The last time it happened was back to the Dragon Knight from 700 years ago. After such a long time, the descendants he left behind no longer have any special abilities. Your appearance has let us once again see the hope of glory." "You're right, Father. I feel like my heart is about to jump out of my chest. This feeling, this beautiful color." Cecilia was talking to herself excitedly as she reached out with her finger, wanting to touch a small tuft of hair on his forehead. Just as she was halfway through this action, Andre suddenly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. In an instant, an invisible force surrounded him and easily blocked this overly intimate action. He very coldly refused. "Sorry, I'm not used to strangers touching my hair, and I also don't like people prying into my privacy." Cecilia obviously didn't expect this to happen, and her face immediately showed a trace of embarrassment. She sheepishly withdrew her hand and carefully explained, "I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to pry into your privacy. I was just a little curious. If I caused any inconvenience to you, I apologize." Yes, I swear on my honor as a noble that the Wickley family definitely didn't have such intentions. All the information came from a banquet a few days ago. Mage Zebulon of the Brooke family had a slip of the tongue after drinking and accidentally revealed some things that happened in the Mage Association. Virginia hurriedly followed suit and swore. In order to ensure that he wouldn't be eliminated prematurely in this battle for the special bloodline, he didn't hesitate to sell out the person who provided the information. He did it so confidently, without a trace of guilt. Seeing that he had achieved his goal of intimidating the other party, Andre's expression eased a little. He squinted his eyes and asked softly, "Oh, tell me about this Mage Zebulon. Who is he? Are you usually close to those people?" As a typical supporter of conspiracy theories, he instinctively felt that someone was plotting against him, so he wanted to investigate. It would be best if there was no one, but if there was someone plotting against him, then be prepared to take the consequences if you can't eat well. Virginia lowered her head and winked at Cecilia, who immediately understood. Cecilia took a deep breath and replied, Mage Zebulon is the second son of Marquis Kyrgyz, a great noble second only to the Duke in Linton City. He was discovered to have a talent for magic when he was 5 years old, and then he became the disciple of Mage Gavin Lauren. He rarely appeared in public after so many years. However, it's said that he's already a powerful spellcaster now that he's returned from his studies. Gavin's disciple? Looks like things are getting more and more interesting. As he spoke, a cold light flashed in Andre's eyes. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Ever since he left the Association of Mages, he always felt that this guy's behavior was very abnormal. He was clearly taught a lesson, but in the end he endured it. It was completely different from his usual combative personality. It turned out that he was secretly plotting something. Although he didn't know what the other party was up to, Andre could already smell the scent of a conspiracy. He secretly recorded Gavin Lauren's name on the list of enemies and prepared to deal with it after he found out the specific reason. He didn't find it strange that Gavin suddenly jumped out to cause trouble. After all, President Boris had begun to make it clear that he wanted to train himself as the next president of the Association of Mages. Gavin Lauren, on the other hand, wanted to obtain the position of president so that the Association of Mages could completely transform into a combat-oriented organization. It could be said that whether it was from the perspective of interests or from the perspective of human nature, Andre was already standing on the opposite side of Gavin Lauren. Unless one of them gave up on the goal they were pursuing, they could only become enemies in the end. Moreover, it was an enemy that wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. He still remembered that when he first came to the vicinity of Linton City, he had planned to investigate the other party. However, it seemed that there was no need to do so now. As the saying goes, being merciful to one's enemy was being cruel to oneself. At the same time, it was also being irresponsible to one's friends and family. Since he had confirmed that Gavin Lauren was an enemy, he had to be prepared to completely wipe out the other party's spirit and body. If necessary, he could even invite him to a duel and kill him in front of everyone to prevent future troubles. Of course, as of now, this guy hadn't decided whether to confront him head-on. He had only sent an apprentice to test the waters. If he overreacted or killed this mage called Zebulon, then not only would he offend a powerful Marquis family, but it would also lead to a series of serious consequences. Obviously, due to some unknown reasons, he still had scruples in his heart and didn't dare to easily fall out with him. He didn't even have the courage to come out personally. However, this also happened to fulfill Andre's wish. Compared to a head-on confrontation, he preferred this kind of complicated battle of wits. Through careful calculations, he could force the enemy into a corner step by step. This kind of feeling was more exciting and satisfying than any other kind of enjoyment. You seem to want to play a dangerous game. Then I'll play a dangerous game with you. After muttering to himself, Andre's eyes flickered with a strange radiance. His expression looked dangerous and callous. Coupled with his flame-like hair and pupils, he was instantly filled with a strange charm. The negative emotions accumulated from the recent massacres were unintentionally released and completely enveloped the carriage. Sitting opposite him, Cecilia could only feel her heart beating wildly. An inexplicable electric current surged from the bottom of her heart and rushed to her brain in just a few seconds. Her whole body couldn't help but tremble slightly. This lasted for more than 10 seconds before she collapsed weakly on the seat. Her seductive red lips parted as she panted for breath, as if she had just undergone an intense exercise. As for Virginia, she was the exact opposite. What she felt was pressure, an enormous and unimaginable pressure. In the blink of an eye, dense beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. A scholar once said that time itself has no meaning. Only when there is a reference does it begin to become incomparably important. Therefore, time is relative. When a person feels happy, he will feel that time flies. When a person feels painful and lonely, he will feel that a day passes like a year. Chapter 320. Without a doubt, Virginia and Cecilia, this pair of scheming father and daughter, had a deep understanding of the situation. The latter was almost suffocating. Andre quickly realized this and quickly adjusted his emotions. In the blink of an eye, he revealed a harmless smile. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I seem to have lost control of my emotions. It's all right. It's our fault." Virginia suppressed the fear in his heart and squeezed out a smile. He wasn't sure if it was a fatal mistake for him to be the first one to test Lindley. "Father, it's already noon. Do you think we should find a place to have lunch?" Cecilia quickly changed the topic. She realized that the method she used to deal with other noble youths didn't work on Andre at all. On the contrary, she was fooled by him. Her figure and face that she was most proud of were completely ignored. She instantly became like most beautiful young ladies and subconsciously wanted to escape. Looking at the panicked expressions of the father and daughter, Andre shook his head and sighed inwardly. As expected of someone tricked them to be cannon fodder. They couldn't even withstand this little pressure. He reckoned that the other nobles were hiding in a corner and peeking at his attitude. It wouldn't be long before they took targeted actions. The lunch location was at a high-class restaurant famous for its seafood. Virginia wasn't stingy with her gold coins and ordered a total of 15 dishes. There were delicious fish, crabs, lobsters, and shellfish. Just the smell alone was enough to satisfy Andre. Of course, it would be perfect if the atmosphere was better. After getting off the carriage, the attitude of these two people instantly changed 180 degrees. They no longer entangled with each other. Other than some flattering nonsense, they did not mention anything about the special bloodline. After all, even the most foolish nobles were true elites. Perhaps they might be blinded by lies and greed for a moment, but they would immediately understand how to remedy the situation once they woke up. Without a doubt, Virginia knew that she had been tricked by everyone. Perhaps that gathering was a trap set up in advance. If not, why didn't she tell anyone else but herself? In addition, he seriously suspected that his damned Uncle George had colluded with an outsider to trick him. Otherwise, why would he be so slow? According to his greedy character, if there were any benefits, he would have already pounced on them like a vicious dog. As for Cecilia, she seemed to be frightened. She didn't say a word and didn't even take a few bites of her lunch. She looked dispirited and listless. Her eyes kept darting around as if she was afraid of something. Linton City's auction house was located in the center of the bustling business district. It was run by the Whale Merchant Group from the Green Sea Alliance's capital, Lucas City. It was only open for business for one day a month, and the rest of the time was spent desperately collecting all kinds of rare goods in preparation for the next auction. It was this spirit that allowed them to become the most powerful commercial organization in the South. It was said that their annual profits even accounted for 10% of the total tax revenue of the Green Sea Alliance. There was no lack of nobles with real power, and they often provided many conveniences and preferential policies. The ultimate goal of many merchants was to join them. Unfortunately, the Whale Merchant Group had very high requirements for their partners. On one hand, they needed to have at least 700,000 gold coins worth of fixed assets. On the other hand, they needed to occupy a dominant position in a certain area. Through this combination of government and business, they were like whales, opening their mouths wide to devour as much as they liked. As long as it was related to making money, they would have a hand in it. They had now spread to every corner of the South, and their influence was so great that it could destroy the economy of any city or country. In order to not excessively stimulate the ruling class and allow them to expand steadily, they had formulated two very interesting strategies. They didn't set up a specialized army and prioritize supply. The former meant that the merchant group didn't have too much military power and couldn't pose too much of a threat to the ruling class. The latter was both loved and hated by the nobles. This was because only those who provided the merchant group with conveniences would be able to receive their help at critical times, such as during times of war, turmoil, or shortage of supplies. In any case, the Whale Merchant Group was a colossus that involved the interests of all parties. However, due to the large number of members and the lack of any political orientation, they were like a pile of loose sand that existed solely for the pursuit of profits. The internal members were neither superior nor subordinate, and were merely providing a platform for cooperation. It had to be said that this set of theories was quite advanced and was in line with the economic development of the 21st century. The first-rate merchants set the standards, the second-rate merchants set the brand, the third-rate merchants sell the technology, and the fourth-rate merchants sell the products. Although Andre didn't know who first came up with this idea, he knew that this was the general rule of business. The Whale Merchant Group happened to be setting the standards for the entire South and, at the same time, making their own brand known. Glancing at the crowd at the entrance of the auction house, he couldn't help but nod and sigh. It seems that more than half of the nobles and merchants of this city have arrived. It's hard to imagine that a mere premium auction could reach such a level. Believe me, you only need to participate once to understand that the goods here will not disappoint anyone. Even if you don't participate in the auction, it's still good to come and take a look, Virginia said with a face full of expectation as he leaned on his silver cane. After chatting for so long, he had a rough understanding of Andre's temperament. He knew that as long as he didn't take the initiative to cross the other party's bottom line, he didn't have to be too afraid. Therefore, his tone was a lot more relaxed, and the bearing of a superior was once again displayed. Coupled with his handsome face, he gave off the feeling of a handsome uncle. However, this graceful image didn't last for more than a minute before it was broken. An old man with white hair and a neatly trimmed beard walked over. He first politely smiled and nodded at Andre, then stared into Virginia's angry eyes and said sarcastically, "My dear nephew, please don't resent me, and don't think of doing anything stupid. I believe that you know how many people are involved in this matter. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being stupid and greedy. Otherwise, why do you think Zebulun chose you and not someone else?" Chapter 3:21. No, I have never resented you, dear uncle. I even want to thank you for teaching me a lesson. Even though the tuition fee is expensive, the Wickley family can still afford it. I will remember this lesson and pass it on to my future generations so that they will remember the price of greed. Virginia's face was gloomy as she resisted the urge to rip the old face in front of her apart. She didn't back down as she replied. Although his hands were clenched into fists due to anger and were trembling slightly, he still maintained the demeanor of a so-called noble. Just like how this class often boasted, even if they were about to starve to death or die of thirst, they would not lose their manners and face. Ha ha, looks like you've finally grown up. If it was before, you would have definitely caused a ruckus. Go back. Cecilia seems to be a little tired. I will take over the matters of entertaining the guests. After saying this meaningful sentence, the old man ignored Virginia and went straight to Andre. He placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. It is an honor to meet you, the successor chosen by President Boris of the Association of Mages, Master Potioneering, Mage Andre. My name is George Mantle, the Earl of Lincoln City. Today, I am here to represent a group of people to have a talk with you. Perhaps we can find some common interests. The corner of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a playful smile. He touched his chin and asked, "What is this? A threat? A negotiation? Or a warning?" No. Please don't misunderstand. This is only an invitation. After all, you are a rising star, and we are looking for a trustworthy partner or investment partner. Please don't be too vigilant. To show our sincerity, we will pay for whatever you buy after the auction begins. As the last syllable fell, the old man stood there with a calm expression, silently waiting for a reply. Compared to Virginia, who was still angry, he was obviously more astute. Relying on his rich life experience, he easily played his nephew in the palm of his hand. Invitation? It sounded interesting. But before that, I need to know who you are representing. At the very least, I need to make sure that there are no enemies. Before Andre could finish his words, he noticed that there were people quarreling and walking towards him. Not just one, but several of them. The leader of the group was a man in his 50s. He was wearing an eye-catching red ceremonial robe, with two 1-foot-long short swords hanging from his waist. His footsteps were steady and powerful, and his two dark gray eyes were like an eagle's as they scanned the surroundings. One look, and one could tell that he was definitely an expert swordsman, full of vigor. As soon as this man appeared, he stole everyone's limelight like an arrogant emperor. Every unlucky person who was targeted by him couldn't help but lower their heads. Virginia even grabbed her daughter's hand and quickly jumped into the carriage without saying a word. It was obvious that they were running away. Damn it, why is this guy here? George Mantle cursed in a low voice. It could be seen that the old man was very wary of the newcomer. To be exact, he was a little fearful. It was obvious that they were not on the same side. As the saying goes, the onlookers aren't afraid of trouble. Andre didn't show the slightest bit of panic. Instead, he laughed. Ha ha, it's getting more and more lively, more and more interesting. As a smart person, he had long since discovered that the nobles of Linton City weren't as harmonious as they seemed on the surface. Especially when it came to their own interests, there were all sorts of open and covert struggles. Sometimes, even dukes would be involved. It was obvious that with the trade war about to start, all the accumulated conflicts would explode. The nobles tore off their masks of hypocrisy and began to form alliances, preparing to make a huge profit. George Mantle stroked the beard on his chin and explained with a cold smile. Interesting? I don't think so. Perhaps you don't know, but that guy's a great noble in this city, second only to dukes. He's called the Bloody Marquis, Kyrgyz Brest. His methods are forceful, and he doesn't like to be reasonable. He's a huge problem. After listening to this introduction, Andre raised his eyebrows, a cold light flashing in his eyes. He smiled and asked, Marquis Kyrgyz? So he's Zebulon's father, the guy who's close to Gavin Lauren? The old man nodded without hesitation. That's right. They're all radical warmongers. They dream of starting a war all day long. Only blood, slaughter, destruction, and plunder can satisfy their perverted addictions. Birds of a feather flock together. Indeed, only birds of a feather flock together. But it doesn't matter. Let me see how this Marquis expresses his forceful attitude. Having said that, Andre took off his hood in front of countless gazes, revealing a head of flaming hair. At the same time, he raised the power of his fire elemental bloodline to the extreme. In just a few seconds, a large number of sparks formed around his body. These sparks spun at an extremely fast speed, and the visual effect was a mess. Without a doubt, this was a show of force. Even though the conversation hadn't started, Andre already saw the other party as an enemy that had to be completely destroyed. A short distance of a few dozen meters wasn't far. In the blink of an eye, Kyrgyz Brest had brought 6 or 7 people with him. He first stared at the old man with contempt for a full 5 seconds, then let out a soft snort and greeted him in a stiff tone. Count George Mantell, I'm very happy to meet you here. I'm sure you and your allies must be feeling very indignant. After planning for so long, you still couldn't stop the outbreak of the trade war. I said a long time ago. Only toughness and expansion are the foundations of this city's strength. If it weren't for your interference 25 years ago, our army would have already rushed into Bakarov City and plundered their wealth, destroyed their shipyards, and raised a group of puppets to become our vassals. It can be said that the reason Linton City is in such a precarious situation today is the inevitable result of the weakness and compromise of you so-called moderates. I despise you. I despise you, because you're all a bunch of cowards. You don't deserve to be called nobles. Fortunately, the god of war, Quintus, once again shrouded the seas in war. This time, I won't let this opportunity slip away. Once the war is over, we'll be filled with wealth and glory, and you rotten conservatives will be swept away into the trash heap of history. Chapter 322. You still have the face to bring up the war 25 years ago? If it weren't for you idiots slaughtering captives wantonly and breaking the rules of trade wars, we wouldn't be in such a passive state now. Do you know what the other cities call the Navy of Lincoln City? Barbarians. Executioners. Remember, how you treat others today will be how they treat you in the future. Think about the great battle in the waters of the Sardinia a few months ago. Why would those pirates rather die than surrender? Because they knew that they would be slaughtered even if they surrendered, so they would rather die in a grand battle. Congratulations! You've made more than half of the southern regions our enemy. The old man roared furiously as he criticized the other side. In his opinion, these warmongers were a bunch of lunatics. They were always expanding the scale and cost of war without limit. They didn't understand that war was merely a means to achieve political goals. It had to be restricted to a certain extent, or else it would be courting death and making enemies everywhere. Looking at the conflict between the two largest factions of Lincoln City's nobles, Andre understood many things in an instant. To put it bluntly, the two sides had differences in interests and political ideals. The conservative faction, with Count George Mantell at the center, mostly operated in relatively traditional industries such as land, artisanal workshops, metal products, cloth, swords, and armor. The biggest characteristic of these businesses was their stability. No matter the time, as long as people were alive, they would need to buy. It was just a matter of how much they earned. Their political views and foreign policies were also very simple. That was to expand their sales as much as possible through diplomatic means and reduce the number of trade wars. After all, once a certain region started to hate or even hate Lincoln City, the sales of various goods in that region would greatly decrease, making it extremely difficult to do business. The warmongers, led by Marquis Kyrgyzstan Brester, were the exact opposite. Their main business direction was to buy low and sell high. Not only did they need a cheap, or even better, free place to produce goods, but they also had to dump them at a high price to make a large profit. They relied heavily on policy support and market changes. It was fine when the environment was good, and the fleet could make money by operating on a few fixed routes. However, if the situation was unstable, such as riots in the raw material production area, or competitors appeared in the dumping area, they had to quell the riots as quickly as possible. Otherwise, the losses would be astronomical in the long run. It was precisely because of this that these people were like the European countries back on Earth during the Age of Discovery. They were bound to embark on the path of expansion. They needed a larger and cheaper production area, and, at the same time, they craved more markets. Therefore, attacking and eliminating the competitors in Bakarov City was their only choice. To some extent, this was a war between the power of capital and the power of tradition. Although the former had great potential, in Oraire, which was full of supernatural power, they could not pry open the corners of the feudal power. They could only stabilize their own interests by constantly waging war, waiting for an opportunity to seize power. The latter might appear to be a little conservative, but the power accumulated over hundreds or even thousands of years was not to be underestimated. Among them, the knights were one of the staunchest supporters. After all, only a feudal system could ensure that they could obtain land, power, and social status. Of course, in fact, these two factions could work together. One side would provide cheap raw materials, the other side would process them into goods, and the former would be responsible for selling them to the entire South. In this way, it would not take long for the city to rapidly expand through maritime trade and eventually become a well-deserved overlord of the sea. However, whether it was due to technological limitations or the greed that pervaded the nobles, neither side was willing to give up on the benefits at hand. Over time, the relationship between them was like fire and water. Kyrgyzstan obviously did not take George's accusation seriously. He only sneered and did not refute, choosing to ignore it instead. That's right. It was a blatant disregard. In the process of communication between nobles, no provocative words could be more insulting than turning a blind eye. The former was just a lack of manners in the heat of the moment, while the latter implied that Kyrgyzstan did not deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as Kyrgyzstan, or it could be said that Kyrgyzstan did not care about Kyrgyzstan and his family at all. As a count, George Mantell was so angry that his whole body trembled. He dared to swear that he had never been treated more rudely in his life. Just as he was about to retort, Kyrgyzstan suddenly turned around, squinting his eyes as he sized up Andre. In a slightly arrogant tone, he asked, "You are the young mage who recently rose to fame?" "That's right, I am," Andre replied with a playful look. "I heard that you have always been against trade wars. Can you tell me why?" Kyrgyzstan's face was serious as he continued to ask aggressively. Unlike the other nobles, there was no trace of flattery or respect in his tone. On the contrary, it was full of doubt, as if he was looking for trouble. Perhaps in the past, Andre would have chosen to compromise or endure when he was not strong enough. But now that he had enough power, he had no intention of indulging the other party's bad habits. He sneered and asked in return, "Why should I answer your question? What obligation do I have to answer your question? Also, even the dukes are polite to me when they talk to me. Who gave you the courage to question me?" Faced with such mockery, Kyrgyzstan's expression changed greatly. He did not expect that someone would dare to speak to him like this. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he nodded with gritted teeth. "Very good, very good. You are indeed as arrogant as Gavin said. Young man, I advise you not to be too arrogant, or else." Before Marquis Kyrgyz could finish his sentence, Andre raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The sparks floating in the surroundings instantly gathered together and let out a loud bang, followed by a heat wave. Marquis Kyrgyz, who was spouting nonsense, was left in a sorry state. After doing all this, he said sarcastically with a playful look, "What else can I do? Why don't you say it? Marquis of Blood? Don't make me laugh. You have only killed a few people with your own hands, and you dare to call yourself a Marquis of Blood. You are merely a senior warrior. Do you really think you are a legendary professional? Shut your mouth and disappear from my sight immediately. Remember, it is best not to look for trouble in the future. My temper has always been bad. Who knows when I will lose control of my emotions and directly cast a large-scale killing spell in front of everyone. Also, tell Gavin Lauren that I will remember this. If there is a next time, tell him to prepare for a magic duel." Chapter 323. Kyrgyz was so angry that he couldn't speak. His two hands gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, and the murderous look in his eyes was almost tangible. The other people behind him also drew their weapons, waiting for the order to rush forward and kill. Haha, angry out of humiliation? I advise you to calm down, because if we start fighting, I guarantee that you won't last more than 3 minutes. With that, Andre quickly activated the illusion ability of the Shifter Beast Ring 3 times a day. Instantly, 3 clones that looked exactly like him appeared around him. Whether it was their looks or movements, they were exactly the same. It was impossible to distinguish the real from the fake with the naked eye. Seeing that a fight was about to break out, the people who came to participate in the auction quickly retreated, leaving a large open space in just a few seconds. The guards at the door also hurried over, using their shields to separate the two sides, for fear of a bloody conflict. Perhaps he didn't want to offend the business group behind the auction house, or perhaps he was afraid of Andre's spell-casting ability. But in any case, Kyrgyz finally suppressed the anger in his heart. He glared fiercely, turned around, and walked toward the auction hall. Without a doubt, he chose to swallow his anger for the time being and wait for revenge in the future. Only Andre didn't want to fight at all, so he quickly canceled the illusion. With a smile on his face, he said to the old man who had been standing next to him, "See, the reason why he likes to be unreasonable is that he hasn't really met someone stronger. To put it bluntly, this kind of person is like a vicious dog. He looks very fierce on the surface, but in his bones, he bullies the weak and fears the strong. As long as you go up and hit him hard, he'll scream and run away." Ha 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 ha. Well said. This is the first time I've seen Kyrgyz suffer in front of so many people. It feels great. It seems that you've made your choice. Please allow me to welcome you on behalf of everyone. George Mantle laughed as he opened his arms and gave Andre a warm hug. He knew very well what the conflict just now meant. At the same time, he also understood that although his old rival had gained the opportunity to expand the war, he was still far from achieving true victory. Everything still had to wait for the final result. There was no right or wrong in the struggle for benefits in politics. It was just a matter of being in different camps. It was a kind of continuous activity between vested interest groups in order to obtain more benefits. From the moment of the birth of power, it had always been with human beings and would never stop. Andre didn't think too much about the clash between the two interest groups in Linton City. After all, as an outsider, the only thing he could do was choose to cooperate with one side and treat the other as his enemy. Obviously, he was disgusted by the radical party style of conduct and attitude, and with Gavin Larne's involvement, joining the Conservative Party was the best choice. At the very least, the attitude of this old man in front of him was 100 times better than Kyrgyzstan's. Of course, as a master pharmacist, Andre had a lot of choices, but if he wanted to expand his influence in a short period of time, it would be best for him to join the game. Although the full outbreak of the trade war meant great risks, it also meant more opportunities. He believed that with his ability, he would be able to gain enough political capital to become a force that could not be ignored in this city before the Linton City Navy was destroyed. There's a saying that the enemy of an enemy was a friend, and the friend of an enemy was an enemy. Since they had a common enemy, George Mantle dropped his disguise. With a smile on his face, he pulled Andre's hand and went directly to the box on the second floor of the auction house. After both parties were seated, he immediately took out a beautifully packaged bottle of wine and 2 goblets from the cupboard beside him. He poured half a goblet into each goblet, and then picked up one of the goblets and said enthusiastically, "For our friendship and future. Cheers." Cheers. Andre also raised his glass and clinked it with the other parties. He opened his mouth and took a small sip, then put it on the table and refused to touch it again. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that it was their first meeting and he didn't want to embarrass the other party, he wouldn't have even taken a small sip. George Mantle obviously noticed this and immediately asked, "What's wrong? This wine doesn't suit your taste. Why don't I get the maid to change it to a better bottle?" Andre smiled and waved his hand. "No, there's no need for that. Even if you put the best wine in the entire South on the table, it won't change my attitude of disgust. In my opinion, although alcohol can make a part of the mind feel happy, but more often than not, it can make the brain go into an uncontrollable state. I hate the taste of it, and I hate the consequences of drinking it even more. So the small sip just now was just out of courtesy." Courtesy? Oh my God, you're such a weirdo. You actually talk about drinking as if it's a torture. You know, in this world, there are 2 kinds of enjoyment that are most important to a man. One is women, and the other is wine. As he spoke, George closed his eyes and gently sniffed the wine, then raised it and took a small sip. It wasn't known if he could really taste it or if he was just pretending. In short, his face was full of enjoyment. After more than a minute, he opened his eyes and exclaimed, "Delicious." As expected of a 50-year-old Beldas Crimson. Not only is it rich and sweet, but it also has a burning taste. Drinking it makes me feel a few years younger. Andre couldn't help but sneer at the old man's behavior. "Huh, sorry, that's just your illusion. Alcohol can't make you feel young, nor can it really warm your body. Everything is an illusion caused by the stimulation of the brain caused by alcohol. In addition, it's best for older people to drink less, especially those with a higher alcohol content. I don't want to hear that you accidentally drank too much and died in the middle of the cooperation. After all, it's not easy to find a reliable ally at this tense and sensitive time. Damn it, you're really an expert at ruining the atmosphere. One sentence, and you made me lose the idea of continuing to drink. AI, forget it. Let's talk about business." After complaining helplessly, George put the cup aside, took out an envelope from his pocket, and handed it to Andre. "Take a look first. This is our condition. If there are any problems, we can talk about it slowly. Anyway, this auction will go on for at least 2 hours. I believe that we can reach some agreements by the end." Chapter 324. Oh, you've even written down the conditions in advance. Are you that confident in winning me over? Andre asked with a smile as he read the teasing words on the parchment. Based on the discussion of wine just now, the distance between the two of them had been shortened by quite a bit. Therefore, when they spoke, they had less scruples and were more casual. However, he knew that the old man in front of him was actually using a special conversational technique. First, he would use some irrelevant small talk to break the strangeness between them, then slowly cultivate their relationship, and finally achieve the goal of making friends. In his previous life, Andre had learned similar tricks, so he was not affected at all. In fact, he even deliberately played along with the old man's act. It had to be said that his age was very deceiving. At least in George Mantle's opinion, a youth who was not even 15 years old could not have too much life experience, no matter how smart he was. As long as he played the emotional card, he would be able to tie him to the Conservative Party's war chariot one day. Just as this scheming traditional aristocrat was about to say something, a burst of enthusiastic cheers sounded in the hall. A woman in her 30s, dressed in a sexy black gown, walked up to the front desk and bowed slightly. "Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to the monthly premium auction. I am the auctioneer, Zoe Bracken. It is my honor to be at your service for the next few hours." "Thank you." As soon as she finished speaking, thunderous applause sounded in the hall. She was like a blooming rose, exuding the unique charm of a mature woman. Coupled with her captivating figure that was accentuated by the tight gown, she instantly attracted everyone's attention. Andre keenly sensed that this woman who called herself an auctioneer was not simple, especially that unusual charm of hers. It was definitely not something an ordinary person could possess. Out of caution, he lowered his voice and asked the old man beside him, "Do you know this person?" Of course. Everyone in the upper circle of Linton City knows Zoe Bracken. How is it? Tempting, isn't she? I was mesmerized by her when I was young. Even now, I still feel a little moved when I think about it. George stared at the front desk with infatuated eyes as he reminisced with emotion. When you were young? My God, then wouldn't she be at least 60 years old? Andre couldn't help but exclaim. One had to know that the woman at the front desk did not have any special bloodline characteristics. She was completely human. Moreover, her face, neck, and the corners of her eyes did not have any wrinkles. Her plump breasts and perky buttocks were still very bouncy. Many of the young people sitting in the front row blushed. It was obvious that they could not control themselves. George shook his head with a bitter smile and explained, "No, Zoe Bracken is more than 60 years old. To be exact, she is 103 years old this year. The reason why she doesn't show any signs of aging is because she rejected the pursuit of a powerful wizard when she was young. The wizard was so angry that he cast a powerful curse on her." After hearing this, Andre opened his mouth wide in shock and muttered to himself, "Curse? You're saying that the curse will allow her to live a long life and never age? Damn it, I want a curse like that too." It wasn't that he was making a fuss out of nothing, but that he really couldn't calm down. After all, this was related to eternal life. Boris, the current president of the Mage Association and an archmage who specialized in transmutation, had tried almost all the known methods in order to prolong his life. However, in the end, it was to no avail. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so excited when he saw the method to escape death. Ulysses, the necromancer, was known as a genius that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. After so many years of research, he had only found a way to barely survive. The side effect was very severe. Every time he transferred his soul, he would have to start from the beginning. But what about this woman in front of him? She only had to endure a curse, and she had almost eternal youth and a long life. It was really enviable. Haha, trust me, you don't want to be entangled with this curse. That wizard used the lives of thousands of slaves to carry out a bloody ritual. The curse gave her a charm that no man could resist, but she couldn't be touched by any man. Otherwise, the man would die instantly. The duration of the curse was the sum of the lives of the thousands of slaves. At this point, a trace of fear appeared on George's wrinkled old face. It was obvious that he had recalled something. However, he quickly adjusted his state of mind and continued. "When I was young, I saw with my own eyes a noble youth who wanted to force himself on Zoe. In the end, he was killed by a chandelier that fell from the ceiling just as he tore off Zoe's clothes. I heard that in these few years, in order to relieve the depression and loneliness in her heart, she started to like women. Really? Sigh. The remaining lives of 1,000 people? Doesn't that mean she has to live for more than 10,000 years? Heavens, that's not much different from eternal life, is it? Andre didn't dare to imagine what kind of magic ritual could produce such a terrifying effect. However, judging from the fact that it was able to steal someone's lifespan, it was most likely related to the arcana of necromancy. He finally understood how terrifying the hidden power of Linton City that Loretta Botons had mentioned was. Just a magic ritual like this could only be performed by a legendary mage of at least rank 20. According to some ancient records, when the ancient magic civilization was at its peak, there was an evil genius who invented a legendary spell. Every time he cast it, he could wipe out all living things within a large area of a city, and then use the remaining lives of the victims to strengthen himself. It was almost the same as this curse. Although he couldn't tell if the person who cast this curse was a legendary mage, Andre was 100% sure of one thing. The person who did this was definitely a mage of at least rank 17, and their attainments and magic rituals were definitely at the peak of perfection. Perhaps it was because he saw Andre's gaze that George hurriedly lowered his voice and warned, "Don't even think about Zoe. Not to mention the terrifying and fatal curse on her. Just the protection of the whale merchant group is enough to make many people apprehensive. If you like beautiful and mature women, I can help you find a few, but it's best to give up on this one." I think you've misunderstood. What I'm interested in is not the lady herself, but the powerful curse on her. Right? You should be very familiar with her, right? Can you introduce us to each other after the auction? I want to take some of her hair and blood back to study. Chapter 325. As a transmigrator, Andre was very curious about this world that was full of incredible powers. There were all kinds of strange species, mysterious arcane spells, and divine spells. Now that he had seen a person with an almost endless lifespan who would never age, he naturally had the urge to find out more. According to the knowledge from his previous life, aging was actually a physiological phenomenon caused by a large number of cells dying and organ dysfunction. The essence of aging was that due to an unknown reason, more and more cells were damaged, causing the weak balance of the body to be broken, and in the end, it would slowly lead to aging and death. Normally, the theoretical lifespan of a mammal was 5 to 7 times longer than the growth period, which meant that the maximum lifespan of a human was not more than 200 years old. This was because genes determined the maximum number of cell divisions. When a maximum number of divisions reached, all the cells would completely lose their vitality. However, the woman in front of him, named Zoe Bracken, had obviously violated this law. Even in the 21st century, where biological and medical technology was highly developed, a woman over 100 years old could not maintain her appearance of around 30 years old. Perhaps the face and body could be maintained through special diet and exercise, but there were still very obvious signs of aging in certain parts of the body. For example, the skin on the neck would become loose, and the wrinkles at the corners of the eyes would be very obvious. One had to know that there was no plastic surgery in this world. Everything was purely natural, so there was a lot of research value. If one could figure out this point, they would be able to solve the secret of immortality. Although Andre was still very young and did not need any spells to extend his lifespan, he wanted to maintain his physical condition under 25 years old forever. After all, once a human passed this age, their learning ability would start to decline greatly. This was also why most mages would not choose children over the age of 14 when they were selecting apprentices. All right, when the auction is over, I will introduce you to Zoe. As for whether it will work or not, it will depend on Zoe's mood. After saying this, George shook his head helplessly. He had met many talented mages, and he knew how terrifying their thirst for knowledge was. If he did not agree, they would definitely use other means. Thank you. In return, except for the last one, I agree to the rest in principle. As for the specific details, we can discuss them later. One had to pay the same price in order to obtain something. Andre understood this principle a long time ago, which was why he would naturally compensate the old man in other aspects after making excessive demands. Moreover, the conditions that the conservatives proposed weren't harsh. Other than the condition of him having sex with more than 40 noble ladies and having children after renting the place, the other conditions were basically within the scope of what each of them needed. George obviously didn't expect the other party to agree so readily. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise and doubt on his face. "Are you sure you don't want to take another look? Especially regarding the trade war that has already broken out. We need you to gain enough military merits at sea to suppress the arrogance of Kyrgyzstan, Brest, and the other warmongers. Also, why did you reject the last one? I guarantee that the women selected by each family will be very beautiful, and they won't have to take any responsibility. Isn't it good to just treat it as a wonderful enjoyment?" Andre shrugged with a smile. "I'm sorry. Although beautiful ladies are very tempting, there are two things I can't accept. First, the result of such a forced arrangement is really uninteresting. Second, I don't have the habit of letting others raise my children, so there's no need to mention this matter again. As for the naval battle, you don't have to worry about it. I'll take a ship out to sea soon to capture the merchant ships of Bakharov and sink their warships. Oh, right, I have something to ask of you. If it's convenient, can you get some bronze, sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter? The more the better." Aurère's naval battles were still stuck in the era of bows, ballistas, and kerosene. Once they got close, they would only be able to hack at each other with scimitars. There was no technique to speak of. Moreover, most of the ships were very bloated. Generally speaking, they were between the 14th and 12th centuries on Earth, and the tall stern would easily cause the center of gravity to be unstable. If he wanted to gain an absolute advantage in this drawn-out war of attrition, it would be impossible without using some knowledge and methods from his previous life. What he wanted to do was to modify a long and narrow galleon ship, and then use bronze to cast a batch of cannons and muskets. He wanted to let the people of this world experience the power of cannons. Of course, these things could only bully ordinary people without supernatural abilities. If there were wizards on the enemy's ships, a combination of flight and fireball would completely nullify the advantage of guns and cannons. In fact, if the conditions allowed, Andre wanted to build an ironclad battleship and use its unparalleled strength to crush the enemy. But it was a pity that technological advancement was never achieved overnight. It involved many basic industrial systems, such as steel production, smokeless gunpowder, mercury fulmination, and so on. Currently, Linton City didn't even have a basic industrial system, so it was impossible for them to build an armored battleship. Not to mention an ironclad battleship. Even the steel refined by the workshops in the suburbs wouldn't meet the standards to make guns and cannons. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen to use bronze, a special alloy that had already been eliminated. One shouldn't think that steel was superior to bronze. In the history of Earth, bronze cannons were only used until the 19th century. Even the Napoleon cannons used during the American Civil War were made of bronze. The reason was simple. Bronze was very malleable, had a low melting point, was easy to smelt, and didn't explode easily. Moreover, the quality of steel at that time wasn't up to standard, so it wasn't strange that bronze was popular. Bronze, sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter? What do you want these things for? Especially bronze, it was already considered outdated more than 2,000 years ago. No matter what you want to make, I personally recommend that you change it to steel. George couldn't understand what use bronze had. It was soft and heavy. If it was made into a weapon, it wouldn't be able to pierce through steel armor. If it was made into armor, it wouldn't be able to withstand the attack of iron weapons. Otherwise, bronze wouldn't have been eliminated so quickly after the invention of steel smelting technology. In less than 70 years, bronze had completely disappeared. Chapter 326. In the whole world, the only place that still used bronze weapons was the kingdom of Saranda, which was located in the center of the continent and surrounded by mountains. Because no iron ore was found there, and there was no decent road at all, the people inside couldn't get out, and the people outside couldn't get in. Only a very small number of brave adventurers could barely pass through the dangerous mountains and bring news out. Therefore, it had been isolated from the world for a long time and still remained in the primitive Bronze Age. Don't ask so many questions, just prepare according to my requirements. In addition, I need at least 150 to 200 tons of bronze. Be sure to get it all together within half a month. Andre obviously didn't intend to explain too much, because primitive cannons didn't require much technology. Once someone knew too much about it, it would be easy to imitate it. Although the most scientific gunpowder formula was needed to display its great power, he couldn't guarantee that someone wouldn't accidentally come up with it, so it was better to keep it a secret. Won more than 150 tons of bronze. Are you sure you're not wrong? Old George could no longer keep calm, and he was so shocked that he couldn't even speak clearly. After all, copper was now used as a basic currency on the Oleo continent. The smallest copper coin was about 10 grams, and more than 200 coins were equivalent to 1 gold coin. In terms of price, 1 kilogram of copper was worth about half a gold coin, and 150 tons were worth 75,000 gold coins. Adding in about 15 tons of tin and labor costs, it would cost at least 100,000 gold coins. For most nobles, 100,000 gold coins was not a small amount. It was equivalent to a medium-sized chamber of commerce's profit for a whole year. Seeing the old man's conflicted look, Andre's lips curled up slightly, and he asked with a playful look, "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" He wasn't deliberately making things difficult for the old man, but he really needed so much bronze. According to the calculation, the average weight of a cannon was about 2 tons, and after deducting the necessary wear and tear, 150 tons of bronze could only be used to make about 60 to 65 cannons. The rest would be used to make some long guns and short guns, which would basically be used up. From a certain point of view, from the moment human civilization entered the age of firearms, two countries at war with each other competed in terms of industrial production capacity. Whoever could produce more and better weapons would be able to arm more troops. During World War II, the United States used the speed of one destroyer every 17 days to forcefully cripple Japan. The Soviet Union also used tractor production lines to create a terrifying number of tank armies. They forcefully defeated Nazi Germany, whose military and technological strength were above them. Andre didn't expect the city's conservative nobles to have such terrifying potential. But if they couldn't even produce 150 tons of bronze in half a month, he would have to consider changing sides. Old George understood that this was a test, so he could only grit his teeth and nod. "Okay, isn't it just more than 150 tons of bronze? I promise to deliver it to you within 15 days. The same goes for charcoal, saltpeter, and sulfur." "Very good. I'm a fair person. I'll return whatever benefits others give me. In a week at most, I have a profitable business to introduce to you. I guarantee that it will exceed everyone's expectations." Having said that, Andre put on a mysterious smile and turned his gaze to the front desk, ready to see what good things were prepared for this premium auction. "Big business? Could it be that you've developed a new magic potion?" Old George couldn't wait to ask. Although the Genius Potion and Hero Potion hadn't appeared on the market yet, many people already knew the value of these two potions. They planned to buy some during the auction next month. Even if they couldn't use it themselves, they could sell it for more than 10 times the price in other cities. It could be said that the hottest topic in Lincoln City recently was these two potions, as well as their inventor, the newly promoted potion master, Andre. However, to the regret of many nobles and merchants, the two potions had already been divided between the Association of Mages and the Four Dukes, leaving only a few leftovers for them. Seeing the old man's burning gaze, Andre smiled and shook his head. "No, although potions can make a lot of money, there's no possibility of mass production. This alone determines its limited potential. The big business I'm talking about concerns thousands of families. Everyone can't live without it, as long as they're still alive." "Damn it, you're not talking about table salt, are you?" Old George was indeed a shrewd person who'd been in the circle of nobles for decades. He guessed the answer right away. "That's right, it's table salt. Otherwise, why do you think Countess Anasta of Westya would choose a marriage alliance? Where have you been at sea for so many days?" As he spoke, a mysterious expression appeared on Andre's face. Oh, 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 oh my God. The women of the Mariel family are really lucky. They actually dug up such a huge gold mine. Hurry up and tell me, do you know of a new sea route? Apart from producing cheap table salt, what other specialties do they have? Old George lost his composure and stood up from his chair. He didn't know if it was because he was too agitated, but his face was flushed and a little purple. In Lincoln City, sea routes meant huge wealth. Every noble had at least one secret sea route, and they could earn huge profits every year. This was especially true for a business like the table salt trade, which was always profitable and never lost money. At this moment, he only hated that he hadn't known about this earlier. Otherwise, he would have done it himself. Even if he had to tie this young man up, he would have tied him to his granddaughter's bed and cooked the rice directly. Andre obviously didn't expect old George's imagination to be so strong. He didn't say anything, but he was inexplicably thought of as having discovered a new sea route. However, this was good. At least he didn't have to say anything. Thinking of this, he smiled and spread out his hands. Sea route? Haha, you can say that. Relax. Countess Anasta of Wesya will return to the city in about a week at most. Then, the truth will be revealed. You should understand that the Mariel family alone wouldn't be able to sell all the table salt, so finding someone to cooperate with became a necessary choice. I'm a person who advocates fairness. Since you and the faction you represent are the first to extend a hand of friendship, then I'll leave the biggest cake for you. There was no doubt that the table salt trade was one of the most profitable businesses in the world. As a necessity, there was no need to worry about a lack of sales. Chapter 3:27. No one could resist the temptation of table salt. Merchants couldn't, nobles couldn't. Even the king would go crazy if he heard of a natural salt lake, and a war might even break out. Old George knew very well how much profit selling salt could bring to the conservatives, so he stroked his beard and paced around a few times. Finally, he slammed the table in the private room. Then it's settled. When I go back, I'll contact the other families and try to satisfy your needs as much as possible. Whether it's ships, sailors, or all kinds of resources, as long as you say the word, we'll definitely find a way to get it. In his opinion, as long as he could get a stable supply of table salt, it would be worth it no matter what price he had to pay. This was especially true for the inland towns north of Lincoln City that were severely lacking in salt. Every 50 to 100 kilometers deeper into the city, the price of salt would double. It was more profitable than robbery. Let's end the cooperation here. The auction has already started, and I still want to buy a few useful things. Seeing the old man's two green eyes getting more and more terrifying, Andre decisively ended the topic. He had seen too many people go crazy over table salt. When Lady Anastasia first obtained the method of drying salt, she seemed to be like this as well. No problem. Like I said before, all of today's expenses will be on our tab. You can choose whatever you like, even if you won't buy that bearhound cub. Old George patted his chest and promised very generously. One had to know that he was a famous miser in Lincoln City. Fortunately, he was in a private room on the second floor. Otherwise, if the other nobles saw him, they would definitely be shocked speechless. While the two of them were talking, a portion of the auction items had been sold off one after another. However, there wasn't anything that was worth too much attention. The highest price was a rare purple pearl the size of an eyeball. It was bought by a mage for 25,000 gold coins. It seemed like he was planning to use it to make magical equipment. After another jewelry transaction was completed, the service staff quickly wrapped something in silk and placed it gently on the table in front of the counter. As they couldn't see clearly what was inside, everyone's curiosity was piqued. The auctioneer, Zoe Bracken, smiled as she looked at the doubtful eyes below the stage. She used a seductive voice to introduce, "Ladies and gentlemen, the next item to be auctioned was very special. It was a rare tree that grew near the volcano on Bird Island in the south. Whenever the lava erupted, this tree would absorb a large amount of fire elemental energy. When the energy accumulated to a certain level, its trunk would split open, revealing the dark red core inside. I believe a lot of people know about the magical properties of the lava tree core. Not only is it the best material for making wands and staffs, but you can also feel warm even in the cold winter of the north if you cut off a small piece and put it on your body. As she spoke, she lifted a corner of the linen cloth, revealing a small section of dark red tree core that was as thick as 3 fingers. As long as one was not blind, one would be able to see the sparks that gathered around it. Arcane art above. It's really the core of the lava tree, exclaimed a member of the Sorcerers Association as he stood up abruptly. He wasn't the only one. Almost all the other sorcerers who came to participate in the auction stood up in unison. Even Andre, who was in the private room on the 2nd floor, was no exception. It could be foreseen that the bidding would be very intense. Old George obviously noticed this and hurriedly came over to ask, "Is this thing very important to you?" Andre nodded without hesitation. "Yes, very important. Help me get it with 50,000 gold coins as the upper limit. If it exceeds this amount, then forget it." Although the core of the lava tree was one of the best materials for making fireball wands, if the price exceeded 50,000 gold coins, then he would rather choose another substitute. After all, the material of the wand only determined the upper limit of the arcane spell. In other words, if other magical plants were used, then the fireball wand might only be able to store 30 spells at most. If the core of the lava tree was used, then it might be able to store 50 spells or more. As for the power of the fireball spell, it was determined by the caster's spellcasting level. The higher the spellcaster's level, the more powerful the spell would be. All right, don't talk about 50,000 gold coins. Even if it's 100,000 gold coins, I'll help you get it. Old George saw the importance of this item and made a prompt decision to guarantee it. As a knowledgeable noble, he was very clear that anything related to magic could not be measured by money. Sometimes, a little sacrifice could be exchanged for an unimaginable huge return. Do what you can. When it's done, I'll give you a small gift. Andre also knew that if he wanted to get the core of the lava tree in front of so many sorcerers, he would have to spend a lot of money. Therefore, he was prepared to make 2 magical equipment as compensation for the old man beside him. Perhaps it was the reaction of the sorcerers that made everyone feel that this item was very rare, or perhaps it was the merchants and nobles present who knew the use of the core of the lava tree. In any case, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly became lively, and the originally lukewarm auction finally entered the climax. Without a doubt, this was the usual tactic of auctions. They would use 1 or 2 items of inestimable value to hype up the atmosphere and pave the way for the next expensive item or the final item. After being an auctioneer for so many years and being over 100 years old, Zobracken knew this like the back of his hand. He paused for a few minutes to let the atmosphere build up. Then he picked up the mallet and knocked on the table with force. Bang, bang, bang. Silence. Please be quiet. I now announce that the starting price of the core of the lava tree, which is 5 meters long and 3 centimeters in diameter, is 15,000 gold coins. Each increment must not be less than 500 gold coins. The auction begins. As the last word was spoken, the hall instantly became lively, and people started to raise the price endlessly. I'll bid 17,000. I'll bid 19,000. 20,000. 22,000. As countless people shouted, the price kept rising. In just a few minutes, it broke through the 30,000 mark, and there was no sign of it stopping. It was so crazy that it was unbelievable. This situation made Andre frown involuntarily. He lowered his voice and complained, "Damn it! Don't these fellows know that this thing can only be used in the hands of a sorcerer? Do they have too much money to spend, or are they deliberately here to cause trouble?" Chapter 328. Aha! My dear friend, do you think these people are spending money recklessly? To tell you the truth, they want to use this rare material to exchange for a chance for their descendants to be apprenticed to a powerful mage. Old George laughed as he explained patiently. In Lincoln City, every noble family with a long history longed for 1 or 2 of their children to become powerful mages. For this reason, They did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to collect rare materials and give them to mages of rank 5 and above. In return, the mages would allow the noble to send one of their children and lead them through the gates of magic until they became an official apprentice or a rank 1 mage. Looking at the fanatical bidders below, Andre sighed helplessly and asked the old man beside him with a wry smile, "How is it? Do you still have the confidence to snatch the core of the lava tree from the hands of these fellows?" Old George took a deep breath and forced a smile as he replied, "I'll do my best. These damned lunatics, they actually raised the price of a broken piece of wood to 70,000 gold coins. It looks like we won't be able to get it within 100,000 gold coins." As someone who often participated in the auctions at the end of the month, he had seen many items with low starting prices being raised to sky-high prices. However, this was the first time he had seen such a popular item. Especially the owners of the wealthy merchant guilds, they did not hesitate in the slightest when bidding, and completely displayed the aura of not giving up until they got their hands on it. 75,000 gold coins, 76,000, 77,000, 78,000. Although the number of bidders decreased by 90% after the price exceeded 70,000 gold coins, and they were much more cautious when bidding, there was still no sign of stopping. It was as if they had entered a protracted war of attrition, and it was all about whose financial resources would give up first. Seeing the price rise steadily, old George felt that he could not go any further. He immediately stretched out his right hand and shouted from the second floor, 90,000. In an instant, the entire hall was silent. Everyone raised their heads to look at the private room on the second floor, their faces full of shock and disbelief. It had to be said that this fellow was indeed an old fox. He had a very accurate grasp of people's hearts. He knew that instead of raising the price bit by bit, it was better to raise it to the top in one go and give everyone the illusion that he was determined to get it, thus eliminating the competitors with weak wills. But unfortunately, he made a mistake, and that was he shouldn't have appeared in front of everyone. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes blaze with hatred. The Blood Marquis, Kurg's breast, who had been mocked by Andre not long ago, immediately found a chance to retaliate. Without a word, he raised his right index finger and yelled with a sinister smile, "I bid 100,000. Today, anyone can take this auction item away, but not you. 110,000. I'd like to see if you can stop me from taking this piece of wood away." Old George sneered back. Perhaps in a direct confrontation, he was a little afraid of the other party's warrior level, but in terms of wealth, he was not afraid of anyone at all. After all, most of the conservative nobles were famous families with a long history, and the income of the industries they operated was stable. Over time, it was definitely an astronomical figure. Moreover, this conflict was in front of so many people. No matter what, they had to win back some face. "Huh, you old miser, you're actually being generous. Come on then, I bid 120,000. Kyrgyzstan raised another finger. 130,000. 140,000. 150,000. Two old men who were over 50 years old went head-to-head like this. They kept raising the price by 10,000, and in the blink of an eye, it had crossed the 200,000 mark. They glared at each other, holding their breaths in their hearts. Neither of them was willing to admit defeat. As for the other bidders, they had already backed out of the competition in fear, silently waiting for the outcome of this confrontation. As the two major powers in Lincoln City's noble system, most people wouldn't easily get involved as long as their brains weren't fried. Otherwise, they would be caught in the middle and could be turned into minced meat at any moment. Just like this, they were just venting. They completely disregarded the price of the auction item and madly increased the price. Let alone ordinary people, even Zobrakin, who had lived for over 100 years, didn't know how to deal with this. He could only look to the person in charge of the auction house for help. However, the latter was obviously very smart. He knew that if he interfered at this time, it would definitely anger both sides. Thus, he chose to wait and see. After all, he could just privately refund some of the money later. Just as the bidding continued to rise and reach the 450,000 mark, Andre, who was sitting on a chair, suddenly turned his head and stared at the corridor on the second floor with a sharp gaze. He held his staff tightly in one hand and silently began to cast a spell with the other. A second later, a majestic beast lifted the curtain and slowly walked in. It had the mouth, ears, claws, and body of a bear. Its head was like a dog's, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. Its neck and tail were abnormally thick, and its two yellow eyes were filled with endless anger. Without a doubt, this was the magical creature that was rumored to be among the hunters, the guardian of kindness and justice in the forest, the bearhound. This smart beast didn't attack. Instead, it spoke in human language in a low voice. "Human mage, don't be so nervous. My wife and I don't want to fight with you. We just want to save our child." "Child? Are you saying that the cub that will be auctioned off later is your son or daughter?" Andre asked, slightly surprised. Of course, when he asked, he didn't forget to look back at the hot-blooded old George. He only relaxed after making sure that the other party didn't notice anything. As a mage with a rich reserve of knowledge, he already knew that the bearhound was proficient in 2 or more languages. Moreover, despite its huge size, it was comparable to a thief in terms of stealth. It would be difficult to be discovered even if it passed behind a group of people. Thus, it wasn't difficult at all to sneak past the city walls and enter an auction house that wasn't heavily guarded. That's right. A group of despicable mercenaries took advantage of the fact that I was out hunting and raided my lair. Not only did they injure my wife, who was weak after giving birth, they also took away one of my children. The bearhound shook its huge head and replied with gritted teeth. Although it had high intelligence, it didn't have many cunning thoughts because it had lived in the forest for a long time. It only spoke one thing and 2 things and hated deceit and lies. Chapter 329. In fact, bearhounds were one of the few wild animals that were kind. Generally speaking, they would not take the initiative to attack humans. Sometimes, they would even take the initiative to offer help to those who were in trouble. Andre nodded thoughtfully. "So that's how it is. What's your plan? Don't tell me you're going to recklessly rush in and fight with the dozens of guards?" "I don't know. I'm not good at these things. If you can give me some useful advice, please help me." The bearhound was not stupid. It knew that it could not face too many enemies at the same time, so it decisively chose to ask for help. In its opinion, since this young human did not make a move at the first moment, he was definitely not a bad person. Since he was not a bad person, he would naturally help it. It had to be said that most of the time, the thoughts of animals were very simple. Their understanding of good and evil was also very clear. They were not as cunning as humans. Mission: help the bearhound rescue its young child. A row of information instantly appeared on his retina. Andre thought for a moment and chose yes. Following that, more information appeared. You have accepted the mission. Difficulty evaluation, above average. Mission completion reward, 6,000 experience points. Random reward, a magical beast cub or egg. Seeing these rewards, Andre's face showed a satisfied smile. He gently touched his smooth chin and said as if there was no one around, "I can only tell you one thing. After the auction is over, all the items will be sold at the first floor of the basement. There are not many guards in the corridor nearby, only less than 10. If someone can hide inside in advance, extinguish the brazier when the buyer passes by, and then attack with lightning speed, there's a high possibility that he will snatch everything. How about it? Do you understand? Basement, lurk, extinguish the brazier, and finally attack in the dark. I think I understand. Thank you very much for your help. I will remember it in my heart. Goodbye." After that, the bearhound quietly left the room just like how it came in, and soon disappeared at the end of the corridor on the second floor. What a smart and cute big fellow. I hope you can save your child safely. After muttering to himself, Andre stood up and came behind the old man. He whispered in his ear, "My friend, give up. The price of this item has exceeded its value by too much. I don't want you to be a sucker." When old George heard this, he immediately turned around and said very seriously, "No, this is no longer a matter of price. It concerns the dignity and honor of nobles. If I back out today, I will become the laughing stock of the entire noble circle tomorrow. To us, there are some things that cannot be compromised. Otherwise, it will immediately be seen as a symbol of weakness. Please believe me, you won't become a laughingstock if you give up now. On the contrary, if you don't give up now, you might become the target of ridicule for countless people. As for the lava tree core, you don't have to worry about it. What's mine will always be mine. No one can take it away from me. After saying this, a chilling smile appeared on Andrei's face. His eyes were as sharp as knives as he stared fixedly at Kyrgyzstan in the bread room. Old George was obviously quite frightened by the words just now. He subconsciously shivered and hurriedly asked in a low voice, "Oh gods, you're not thinking of robbing it, are you? Don't do anything stupid. If you are seen attacking a marquee in public, your reputation and status will be completely ruined. You might even be banished." The corners of Andrei's mouth rose slightly, revealing a sinister smile. He replied in a low voice, "Don't worry, I'm not a fool. Why would I do something as stupid as robbing? But just because I won't do it doesn't mean that others won't do it. In short, try to raise the price of the remaining auction items as much as possible. Let that dead-faced fellow bleed a little. When he loses both his wealth and goods, we'll ruthlessly mock him." The battle prowess of the bearhounds, especially their sneak attacks, was definitely not something that a few low-level warriors could withstand. Moreover, there were two bearhounds attacking together this time. Even if the chief knight of Lincoln City came, he would only be able to barely hold them off. What he wanted to do was to use the short-distance teleportation on the magic ring to take advantage of the bargain and steal all the items that Kyrgyzstan had bought. He would let this fellow taste the bitter fruit that he had sowed. Let's see if he still dared to look for trouble for no reason in the future. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This was the code of conduct that Andrei pursued. If the enemy was stronger than him, then he would bear with it for the time being. When he was confident, then he would retaliate even more fiercely. Ulysses' death was the best example. It was obvious that Kyrgyzstan and the power behind him were not enough for Andrei to bear with it. Therefore, he wanted to teach the other party a lesson that would leave a lasting impression. "My dear George, Count Mantell, could it be that you intend to admit defeat? Or are you saying that you don't have enough money? If you don't make a sound, then this auction item will be mine." Seeing that his old rival did not continue to bid, Kyrgyzstan Brest smugly mocked and ridiculed. Not only was he venting his anger, but he was also displaying his strength to everyone present. After all, for nobles, especially those from the southern city-states, wealth was an important standard to measure strength. Only with great wealth could one hire powerful professionals. Only with great wealth could one build a loyal private army. Only with great wealth could one rope in enough allies. To a certain extent, the rulers around Lincoln City had already changed from a primitive land economy to one based on trade. They were like a group of greedy vultures, searching everywhere for prey, killing and devouring the corpses to strengthen themselves. Old George did not have the time to ask Andrei, who was trying to steal the auction item. He immediately turned around and pretended to be furious as he roared, "Don't be so happy just yet. Just wait and see. I don't believe that you can take down all the following auction items." As an old fox who had been in the circle of nobles for decades, his acting skills had surpassed many professional actors. Whether it was his expression, tone, or actions, they were all flawless. No one could tell if he was faking it or not to mention that there was such a long distance between the two rooms. "Ha ha, then let's wait and see. I hope your actions are as powerful as your threats. Otherwise, you'll be like a mad dog that only knows how to bark and completely disgrace your family." Chapter 330. Kyrgyzstan laughed wildly as he sat down again. He raised his chin slightly and assumed a condescending posture, his eyes filled with provocation and contempt. "Oomph." After a cold snort, old George returned to his seat. His angry expression was swept away, and he asked with a playful expression, "I feel that you clearly have a hidden meaning in your words. Tell me what's going on. Who wants to rob Kyrgyzstan? Maybe I can help a little." Andre smiled mysteriously and pointed at the cage covered with a black cloth at the front of the hall. Do you still remember the finale of the auction? Of course. Isn't it just a young bear hound? I've even seen the egg of a war rider dragon. Only those low-class nobles and merchants would be interested in it. Old Joey glanced at the people below who didn't have the qualifications to enter the private rooms on the second floor. His eyes were filled with disdain. As the name implied, a war rider dragon was a carnivorous dinosaur bred through hybridization. It could carry powerful warriors or knights on its back and rampage on the battlefield. Even the overlords of the sky, dragons, had to be extra careful when they saw them. Otherwise, it wouldn't be strange if they were bitten to death. They had thick and powerful hind legs, short and sharp front claws, strong and powerful jaws, thick and tough teeth, and tough scaly skin that covered their back all the way to their spiked tail. When they reached adulthood, they would be 5.5 meters tall, with a body length of more than 10 meters, including the tail, and their weight could reach more than 12 tons. In order to increase their fighting strength, these terrifying predators would be covered with heavy half-body armor. Their charging speed could reach up to 40 kilometers per hour, and their endurance was excellent. One had to know that a light tank only weighed between 10 to 20 tons. When it ran at full speed, it could easily crush ordinary vehicles into scrap metal. If it ran over a person, that person would definitely be reduced to ashes. Just imagine if a Tyrannosaurus Rex covered in metal armor suddenly rushed into the battlefield. What kind of spectacular scene would that be? It was definitely not much worse than a tank charging into an infantry formation. Moreover, it could jump, bite, and use its sharp front claws to tear open the enemy's stomach. That's right, this was a war dragon, the ultimate cavalry of the entire Oleo continent. Only the two easternmost kingdoms had the technology to breed and domesticate these creatures. Both sides desired to be the only ones with war dragons, so every once in a while, a fierce war would break out. Many people took the opportunity to steal the eggs of the war dragons and sell them elsewhere for auction. It was said that just the starting price alone was more than 100,000 gold coins. Andre had long been fascinated by these strange things. Naturally, he had heard of the great name of the Battle Knight Dragon. At the same time, he also knew that every time their eggs appeared in the auction house, it would cause a huge commotion. Unfortunately, this kind of investment didn't mean that they would get a return. It might even bring disaster. First of all, hatching dragon eggs was a huge problem. Due to the confidentiality of the technology, 99% of people didn't know the conditions for hatching. Some people chose to heat it with fire, but in the end, they were roasted alive. Next was the domestication method. After all, this was a huge monster comparable to a Tyrannosaurus Rex. In the monster guide, its challenge level was 16. Moreover, as a reptile, its intelligence was shockingly low. Most of the time, it relied on its instincts to move. It might suddenly go crazy and swallow its master. In Andre's view, such a terrifying carnivore full of uncertainty and danger was far inferior to a bear hound. Although the latter's combat strength was much lower, at least it was smart enough to understand relatively complex orders. Usually, as long as they cultivated a good relationship, there would be no danger. Thinking of this, he smiled and shook his head. Sometimes, more power isn't better. First, you have to have the ability to control it. Forget it. It's probably useless to talk to you about this. Let's talk about business. Just when you were confronting Kyrgyzstan, the bear hound's parents appeared, and I happened to give them some useful advice. Take a guess. Can our blood marquis and his followers withstand the ambush of two bear hounds in the dark? Hearing this, old George's eyes instantly lit up. He immediately laughed and clapped his hands. Ha ha, you're really bad, but I like it. Bad? No. I prefer to call this chivalrous. Think about it. If Kyrgyzstan spent a lot of money to vent his anger, but in the end he was attacked by two bear hounds and lost all the goods he bought, what would the result be? Saying this, Andre gently stroked the black crystal ring on his finger. His orange pupils flickered in the dim light, emitting a strange charm. Old George seemed to feel the strange atmosphere. He subconsciously shivered and asked carefully, You plan to act together with the bear hounds when they attack? Andre nodded without hesitation. That's right. To be exact, I'll rush in to help the moment the bear hounds attack and take away all the goods. Of course, I'll need your support. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to take so many things out. As a mage with a meticulous mind, he would first run countless simulations in his mind before taking any action. He would find the weak points and think a way to make up for them. The most difficult part of this operation was how to take all the goods out of the auction house after the robbery without alerting anyone. After all, the ring's short-distance teleportation had a fatal weakness, and that was that it had to be within the range of the eye to complete the accurate teleportation. Moreover, whether it was the golden idol or the 1-meter-long lava tree core, there was no way to hide them on the body. Thus, he needed a helper in charge of providing support. Old George had obviously never participated in such an operation before. He seemed a little nervous. He kept shaking his legs while licking his lips from time to time. Finally, he fiercely slapped his thigh. Damn it, that sounds so exciting. But as long as I can make Kyrgyzstan suffer a big loss, I'm willing to do anything. After hearing the other party's affirmative answer, Andre smiled and extended his right hand. Hee, then welcome to the team. I guarantee that 1/3 of the goods will be yours after we get them. Now, continue to provoke that cute Mr. Marquis and try to make him bleed more. This way, when an accident happens, the expression on his face will be more interesting, right? Also, don't raise the price too high. Otherwise, if we accidentally buy them, we'll be the ones to suffer a loss. Chapter 331. Hee. Don't worry, I know the financial resources that guy can use like the back of my hand. I'll definitely tighten his psychological bottom line and let him have a good taste of what a huge mistake it is to be our enemy. After saying that, old George smiled sinisterly and reached out his right hand to clench it together. The two cunning men, one old and one young, had finally become close allies. Soon, there was a burst of happy laughter in the private room. Andre could already imagine how embarrassed Kyrgyz's breast would be after losing a large sum of money and all the auction items. Not to mention his enemies. Even his closest allies would suddenly turn against him. If he didn't handle it well, it could lead to the bankruptcy of his family. The leader of a faction sounded very high-end, impressive, and high-class, but in essence, it was just a representative elected by a group of interests. On one hand, it was to set a benchmark to unite allies and fight against enemies. On the other hand, it was to attract firepower so that the other families could hide behind it. For a position like this, it would be fine if one didn't make a big mistake, but once one made a big mistake, they would immediately be abandoned by the group of interests. Similar things had happened before in this magical land. Poor Kyrgyz's breast didn't know that he had become the prey that had fallen into a trap. He was still standing proudly on the opposite side, his expression full of provocation. The confrontation between the two noble factions in Linton City, as well as the boldness and heroism of throwing out hundreds of thousands of gold coins without even batting an eyelid, allowed everyone present to see the wealth behind them. At the same time, it pushed the atmosphere of the auction to its peak. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zoe Bracken hurriedly introduced the first auction item of the day. It was a golden idol that was 30 centimeters tall and weighed about 25 kilograms. Not only was it a valuable antique, it could also release 6 types of healing magic below level 3. It could be used 3 times a day for each level. It was definitely a rare item. Of course, the price was also very expensive. Just the starting price alone was 30,000 gold coins. As soon as it was taken out, it caused a stir. Many people stood up from their seats and stared greedily at the shining golden statue. Even some shrines sent out representatives to see if they could take it and offer it to the gods they served. Objects that contained divine power and faith had always been the target of countless people, especially the golden statue placed on the front desk of the hall. It was obvious that it had absorbed a large amount of faith from mortals, and there was still a small amount of divine power left. Such an item hadn't appeared in Linton City for decades, so the bidding jumped from 30,000 to 100,000. The bidder was none other than the newly promoted bishop of the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, Clarice. Due to her outstanding performance in the underground labyrinth and her success in stopping the Shadow Sorcerer's plan to break the seal, she was greatly rewarded the moment she returned to the city. Not only was her level forcibly raised to level 12, but she was also promoted from a high-ranking administrator to a bishop who presided over a region. Her position was second only to the highest-ranking archbishop in the vicinity of Linton City. The gorgeous gemstone emblem on her chest was the best proof. As a goddess who had part of the sun priesthood, almost everyone knew that Lucia's wish was to complete her incomplete sun priesthood and restore the glory of the only sun god in ancient times. As a high-ranking priest of her church, Clarice could tell at a glance that the power contained in the statue was almost the same as the power of the fallen sun god Adam. She had to get it at all costs and then offer it to the goddess. Otherwise, if it fell into the hands of the enemy, it would be troublesome to get it back. It should be known that although the Church of the Goddess of Dawn was very powerful, it was not without opponents. Many churches of the evil alignment gods were looking for trouble openly and secretly. Among them, the Church of the God of Tyranny, Golden, was the most active. Sometimes bloody conflicts would even break out. The two sides could be said to have deep grudges, as this god advocated that the lower class must be absolutely obedient to the ruler, and torture, and killing to suppress those who disobeyed. It was supported and approved by some of the nobles in Linton City. In particular, the warmongers led by Kurgis Breast basically liked this set of arguments very much. As expected, the two sides began to compete for the ownership of the statue without saying a word. The price broke through the 400,000 mark in just a few minutes. Looking at his old rival fighting to the death with the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, old George was simply overjoyed. He laughed and teased, wow, Kurgis is really crazy. To think that they would stand up against the Divine Hall so openly. Doesn't he know the consequences of doing so? Rubbing his chin and thinking for a few minutes, Andre smiled playfully. No, on the contrary, I think he's fearless. Think about what they've been doing recently. Don't you think there's something unusual about it? Unusual? Old George frowned, a thoughtful expression appearing on his face. Now that you mention it, it does seem to be a little bit. According to the report of the spies we sent, a few people in black robes suddenly came to Kurgis's house more than half a month ago. They haven't come out since they went in. Could it be? Before he finished speaking, Andre nodded lightly, more or less. He must have secretly formed an alliance with some forces. Otherwise, how could he dare to go against the Church of the Goddess of Dawn? It seems that more and more forces are starting to get involved. The entire South will soon be in turmoil. There was a saying that pull one hair and the whole body will be affected. It was most appropriate to describe the recent situation in Linton City. After all, this city was the overlord of the entire Southern Sea. There are so many city-states, churches of gods, trading companies, pirates, secret organizations with ulterior motives, and so on. They were all paying attention to the changes here at all times. Some were speculators who wanted to get some benefits for themselves, and some were schemers who wanted to overthrow the regime. In short, the situation he had to face was quite complicated. Not only did he have Loretta Botons as an enemy, but more and more people would join in as the maritime dispute escalated. As a smart person who could see the big picture, Andre knew very well what kind of situation he was facing, so he had been actively roping in allies to prepare for the upcoming game. Of course, it was not easy to do this, because others would not easily tell you their purpose, and it was also impossible for them to reveal the plan hidden in their hearts. Everything had to be judged based on experience and feelings. Chapter 332. However, the years of hard work in society in his previous life allowed Andre to come up with a special method that could effortlessly distinguish who could be friends and who was destined to be enemies. The method was simple. It was to see if the other party had an irreconcilable conflict of interest with him. If there was, then this person or organization would fall out with him sooner or later, even if they did not show hostility for the time being. If not, even if they had some unpleasant experiences in the past, they could still form an alliance for a common goal. Interests would not lie. It was precisely because of conflicts of interest that there would be fights, compromises, and cooperation. At the thought of a group of unknown fellows playing tricks around him, Andre sneered inwardly. He said to the old man beside him, "Find out the background of those fellows in black robes as soon as possible. I have a hunch that they will be our main opponents in the next half a year or so. I've already hired adventurers to investigate. I believe there will be results soon. No matter who these people are, where they come from, and what their purpose is, they have chosen the wrong side and the wrong target to invest in," old George said with a sinister expression. The conservative nobles were still nobles. Although they were not as aggressive and extreme as the pro-war faction, they were essentially the same. Once they confirmed who their enemy was, they would definitely spare no effort to attack. Sometimes, they would even mobilize their private army to start a small-scale war. In that case, I'll leave this to you. I'll go and make some preparations. Remember to stand at the stairs leading to the basement for a few minutes after the auction ends. Otherwise, I won't be able to pass through the magical alarm set there. With that, Andre stood up and quickly cast a level 2 spell, Invisibility. He disappeared in the air in the blink of an eye. Is this the power of magic? It looks really convenient. Watching a living person disappear before his eyes, old George couldn't help but mutter to himself with a sigh. Although he had hired a mage as his personal consultant, he rarely got to see him cast spells. Moreover, he could not even find a person with the talent of a mage in his descendants. Hence, he yearned for this kind of power that ordinary people could not understand. As he had entered the state of invisibility, Andre did not respond to the old man. Instead, he left the box alone and walked toward the entrance of the basement. It wasn't that he didn't want to speak, but that he couldn't. This was because the invisibility technique had a fatal flaw. While it was in effect, whether it was speaking or making any offensive movements, it would cause the Arcane technique to lose effect, instantly exposing the user. Along the dimly lit corridor, Andre passed the guards without any mishap. It didn't take long for him to reach the lobby on the first floor. Just as he was about to step into the basement, he suddenly saw 2 huge Bolton fighting dogs. From the color of their fur and thick lips, he could see that they were pure-blooded. Their attack power was no weaker than a lone wolf in the wild. There was no doubt that invisibility was useless against canine creatures with a keen sense of smell. Even if they were blind, they could easily detect a stranger approaching. Seeing the 2 ferocious-looking dogs baring their teeth and growling menacingly, Andre couldn't help but frown and curse inwardly. Damn it! What kind of dog are you keeping for a proper auction house? Moreover, it's such a large fighting dog. He was very clear that he only had 2 choices now. One was to immediately use arcane magic to get rid of these 2 troublesome dogs. After that, he would quickly take care of the surrounding guards without letting them make the slightest sound. As for the other choice, he would immediately use short-distance teleportation to leave this place and completely give up on his next move. Obviously, he didn't have much time to think in this situation. In particular, the abnormal reaction of the 2 fighting dogs had already attracted the attention of one of the guards. He had already unsheathed his long sword and was vigilantly observing the surroundings, trying to find the invisible intruder. It had to be said that in this world where supernatural forces ran rampant, anyone who could become a profession basically had very thick nerves. Even if they saw something unbelievable, they could still accept and adapt in a short period of time. All right, looks like I'll have to let you guys sleep for a while. After making up his mind to choose the first option, Andre calmly took out a pink potion bottle from his waist pouch. Holding his breath, he gently pulled out the cork and let the colorless and odorless gas evaporate in the air. In just a few seconds, an unbelievable effect was produced. Whether it was the ferocious dogs that were baring their teeth or the guards that were holding sharp swords, all of them seemed to be drunk. They suddenly became unsteady, and not long after, they fell to the ground with a plop, snoring loudly. Seeing that the magic potion had begun to take effect, he immediately nodded in satisfaction. Carefully dragging the sleeping guards and fighting dogs to a dark corner, he safely entered the dark underground tunnel. Ever since he had obtained the Shadow Sorcerer's spellbook, Andre had learned many new arcane spells from it. The potion bottle just now was made with a level 1 spell, Hypnosis. When it came into contact with the air, a large amount of it would evaporate. Anyone who breathed in a certain amount would feel a strong sense of drowsiness. Even if they were on the battlefield, they could still fall asleep. Of course, this state of sleep was not stable. Once they were attacked, they would instantly wake up. Andre had never been a person who liked to kill, even if killing could allow a mage to level up quickly. In his opinion, no matter what he did, there should be a limit. Just like how people must know how to restrain their own desires, ambitions, and greed. Otherwise, sooner or later, they would be slaves controlled by their instincts. Especially when it came to killing people of the same kind, it was easy to create negative emotions. Moreover, it was very addictive. He did not want to become a psychopathic murderer one day, or a crazy mage with a mental disorder. Therefore, it was necessary to keep a bottom line. Unless the life of his family or himself was threatened, he would not easily cross the red line. In his previous life, Andre had seen too many people who were tempted and broke the bottom line time and time again. Among them, there were officials in politics, and there were also businessmen who carefully ran their businesses. At the very beginning, they had all set a red line for themselves and swore that they would never break it. But it was a pity that most of the time, money, power, and women were always more tempting than morality, especially when the social atmosphere was so impetuous. Usually, it would not take more than 2 years to drag a fair and honest official into the water, and it would also be enough for a legitimate businessman to learn how to bribe. After breaking the bottom line for the first time, humans would have a very strange thought. That was, since you have broken it once, there was no harm in breaking it again. When you finally reached a dead end, you would be shocked to find that you had forced yourself into a dead end. Therefore, Andre was not willing to easily break the bottom line that he had always held. And his bottom line was that he would never kill innocent people, even if it was very likely that he would have to pay a terrible price. Chapter 333. The architectural style and structure of the auction house was similar to that of most noble houses. The ground was hollowed out as a vault to store expensive items. After bidding, all the auction items would be sent to the heavily guarded underground vault via cable. After the auction was over, the buyer would make the payment and the goods at the same time. To ensure absolute safety, the builder had designed a narrow passageway that was almost 100 meters long between the vault and the staircase. Both sides of the passageway were filled with arrow holes, and there were no less than 10 magic traps on the ground. Even a bird would not be able to fly through the passageway, let alone a living person weighing more than 50 kilograms. However, Andre did not plan to enter the vault. He found a dark corner and hid there, quietly waiting for the auction to end. Although he did not find any trace of the bear hound, he knew that it must be nearby. Perhaps it would be difficult for a human to get past 2 fighting dogs, but for them, who had the special ability Wild Identity, changing the attitude of a dog was a piece of cake. The underground passageway was very quiet. Other than the occasional crackling sound from the braziers used to light up the place, there was only the occasional breeze from the vent. Andre silently observed the movements at the entrance of the vault. Every time an auction item came down, he would squint his eyes and carefully observe it. His time as a hunter in Lonely Mountain Town had trained him to have an incomparable patience. He could even wait for a few hours in the same spot without any problem. As time passed, the auction items slid down the cable inside the stone wall one by one. A few staff members carefully placed the expensive items on the stone table at the side. At the same time, they placed a piece of parchment with the transaction price written on it, so that the buyer could clearly see the amount they had to pay. Of course, such a transaction that cost tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of gold coins was not likely to be done in cash. After all, no one liked to carry dozens or hundreds of kilograms of gold around. Therefore, most of the time, the payment was still made by the merchants. just as Andre was secretly estimating the value of the dazzling items. A strange howl suddenly came from the other end of the passageway. Following that, a 1-meter square iron cage slid down. Inside it was none other than a bear hound that had just been born for a few weeks. The little guy had white hair all over its body, and its 2 pale yellow eyes looked around innocently. It howled and licked its front paws, as if it was calling for its parents. It looked very cute. In an instant, the entire tunnel was quickly filled with a murderous aura. In the blink of an eye, 2 strong and vigorous silhouettes vaguely appeared in the darkness. After only a second, everything returned to normal. There was no doubt that it was an adult bear-hound couple, but because they couldn't cross the pit-filled passage, they chose to endure for the time being. The cub, the golden idol, and the mysterious map, the 3 finale items have all arrived. Now it's time to pick up the bargain. I hope this dear Marquis is magnanimous and won't be angered to death. Andre mocked Kyrgyzstan in his mind before he quickly entered battle mode. Although he had no intention of clashing head-on with the other party, since he was already here, he had to leave a mark for the other party. Otherwise, how could he face the other party's arrogant attitude and provocation? At the same time, he could also let everyone know how he treated those with ulterior motives. That's right. What Andre wanted to do was create a misunderstanding. He wanted everyone to know that he was the one who did it, but he didn't leave any evidence behind. This way, the enemies hiding in the dark would feel fear and be afraid that they would suffer the same treatment. Just like the saying went, when dealing with the enemy, whether it was killing, threatening, or destroying, they were all just means. The real goal was to use these to intimidate the enemy and make them feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. If you couldn't do this, then no matter how much you killed, you would only incite anger and hatred. As one of the few extreme negative emotions, fear could produce many interesting phenomena, such as accelerated heartbeat, increased blood pressure, pale face, weak limbs, cold sweat, and so on. In serious cases, it could even cause breathing difficulties and eventually suffocate to death. However, these were all physiological manifestations. What really interested Andre was the changes in the heart, or rather the brain. When humans felt fear, their perception, memory, and thought processes would be impaired. They would completely lose the ability to analyze and judge the current situation, and they would do some stupid things. What he wanted to do now was to make Kyrgyz breast fall into endless anger and fear. Then, in the following actions, he would make the wrong judgment and expose his friends one by one. This was what it meant to create a pig-like teammate. Less than 10 minutes after the auction ended, many people began to follow the order of the auction and came to the basement one after another to collect the items they had bought. However, none of them noticed that the guards and fighting dogs that were supposed to be at the entrance were sleeping soundly in a dark corner. They also didn't notice the 2 terrifying beasts lurking in the dim corridor. Seeing the auction items being taken away one by one, even the tenacious Andre couldn't help but feel nervous. All the muscles in his body tensed up subconsciously. The eyes hidden under the hood stared at the corner. With the help of night vision, he could easily see everyone's faces. Suddenly, a flattering voice sounded from the staircase connected to the hall on the first floor. "Lord Marquis, you really stole the limelight today. Not only did you ruthlessly crush the conservative faction's face, even the insufferably arrogant Church of Light had no choice but to lower their heads before you. It seems that it was a wise choice to elect you as our leader. Rest assured, all the expenses today will be distributed to all the families according to the ratio." As soon as he finished speaking, a large group of people walked out from the corner. Among them were old men with white hair and beards, as well as youths who looked to be in their 20s or 30s. All of them had excited expressions on their faces as they discussed the auction. These people were none other than Kyrgyz Breast and his party. Perhaps it was because they had successfully bought most of the treasures, but all of them seemed exceptionally happy and kept on praising the Marquis of Blood. Chapter 334. Another man in the prime of his life snorted coldly and said arrogantly, "Humph, of course. We control a quarter of this city's businesses, fleets, and wealth. If we can't even suppress a mere church, how can we control the political situation in the future? Also, don't underestimate that old fox George Mantle. Although I don't know why he chose to give up at the crucial moment today, one thing is for sure. The conservatives are definitely plotting something. Another man with a mustache nodded in agreement. That's right. Although we've achieved a glorious victory, we've paid a high price. After all, we have to fork out 2 million gold coins at once. That's almost all of our liquid funds. There's nothing to worry about. Hasn't the trade war already begun? We can send a portion of our warships to capture the merchant ships of Bakarov City. It won't take long for us to fill the gap. Besides, with that golden idol, that lord will definitely... Before the man could finish speaking, Kyrgyzstan immediately glared at him with a sharp gaze and scolded sternly. Shut up, idiot. If I hear you spout nonsense in public again, don't blame me for being rude. I'm very sorry. I couldn't control myself for a moment. I promise there won't be a next time. The man was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. He hurriedly shrank his neck and bowed in fear. As they spoke, the few of them quickly passed through the pit-filled corridor and arrived at the entrance of the warehouse where the auction items were stored. Without wasting any time, Kyrgyzstan Braster took out a thick stack of bills and handed it to the other party. After a few minutes of checking, he asked the servants to carry everything and walked back to his room at a leisurely pace. Just as he stepped out of the narrow corridor, 2 huge shadows descended from the sky and instantly pounced on the brazier used for illumination. For a moment, the back half of the corridor was plunged into complete darkness. A portion of the people who had just walked down the stairs fell into a panic, cursing and screaming incessantly. Seeing this, one of the people in charge of the auction house quickly yelled at the guards beside him, "Don't just stand there. Hurry, activate the magic defenses. You must ensure the safety of the guests." As a senior manager of this auction house, he knew very well that under special circumstances, the priority should not be the expensive auction items, but the guests who came to participate in the auction. One had to know that the guests who were qualified to participate in the premium auction were mostly rich and respectable. Half of them were nobles and big merchants. If there were any casualties, there would be no business in the future. After all, they would only lose some money if they lost something, and they would be able to earn it back in the future. However, if there were not enough customers, no matter how good the product was, it would not be able to sell for a high price. Hee. Only now did you remember to activate your magic defense. It's too late. As he spoke, Andre dashed forward and punched the nose of the servant holding the lava tree core. The servant's face instantly split open. The unlucky guy let out a blood-curdling scream, then fell to the ground with a plop. He covered his face with both hands, and tears kept flowing down. As for the item in his hand, it had already fallen into Andre's hands. A satisfied smile quickly appeared on Andre's face as he felt the dense fire elemental energy coming from the wooden stick in his hand. The first treasure is mine. Roar, roar. Noticing that someone was helping them, the 2 bear hounds hurriedly let out a deafening roar. They waved their sharp claws and aggressively charged into the crowd. Everywhere they passed, they immediately set off a bloody storm. The dense smell of blood and howls of agony lingered in the air. However, they were still animals of the benevolent camp. Even if they were burning with rage, they would not kill so easily. Most of the people had only suffered superficial wounds that were far from fatal. As long as they were bandaged, they would recover in a few days. However, it was precisely because of this that more and more people were screaming, and the sound was even more terrifying. This was especially so for the person in charge on the other side of the passage. His forehead was already covered with soybean-sized beads of sweat. He could already foresee that if anything happened to these distinguished guests, he would not be able to survive. Don't panic. Don't panic. Form a circle. These 2 beasts are here to save that cub. As long as we hold on for a while, they'll be dead once the magical defense is activated. Kyrgyzstan Braster was indeed a great noble known as the Marquis of Blood. Even in such a chaotic situation, he did not show any signs of weakness. Instead, he called for the people beside him to draw their weapons and stand back to back, ready to fight to the death. Even though he could not see anything in the darkness, as a warrior of a high level, he had once learned how to fight blindly. He could calmly deal with most of the enemies just by relying on his voice and sharp intuition. It had to be said that this shout played a significant role in the chaos. Many of the men hurriedly drew their swords and quickly formed a seemingly weak but actually very effective defensive formation. In just a few seconds, several wounds were left on the bearhounds. Andre, who had just flipped over another servant and snatched a treasure map in a box, quickly noticed the situation at hand. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he purposely tightened his voice and used a teasing and low tone to tease. Ayaya, you can't bully us with numbers like this. After all, the game has to be fair to be fun. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised both of his hands and began to loudly chant a spell. The originally dark corridor suddenly flashed with a faint light. Under the illumination of this light, everyone could see a cloaked figure. However, because the light was too dim, it was impossible to see clearly with human vision. They could only feel the energy filled with magic reverberating in the air. Such a strange scene shocked everyone present. No one knew who was the first to react, but he immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, "Quick! Stop him! Don't let that mage cast the spell successfully. This is the underground. There's no space to dodge at all." Unfortunately, he forgot that Andre was not the only one who launched this attack. The two bearhounds easily identified who was helping them through the smell. Without saying a word, they launched an attack from the flanks. In the blink of an eye, 4 or 5 unlucky fellows were toppled over. The space in the corridor was very narrow to begin with. It could only allow 2 to 3 people to walk side by side. There was no space to dodge at all. Thus, it was especially disadvantageous when facing such large beasts. There was no other choice but to bite the bullet and fight for their lives. Chapter 335. Taking advantage of the time his allies had bought, Andre quickly completed the Arcane spell in his hands. He raised his hand and pointed lightly, causing a small cloud of green gas to explode in the tunnel. Everyone who came into contact with the gas covered their noses and mouths as they knelt on the ground. Those with better physiques vomited, while those with weaker physiques rolled their eyes and fainted. Rank 3 Arcane spell. Stinking Cloud activated. Target inhaled large amounts of poisonous gas and vomited. Target inhaled large amounts of poisonous gas and fainted. As a large number of notifications popped up in his vision, the entire tunnel was littered with corpses. All sorts of sour smells filled the air, and even those who hadn't inhaled the poisonous gas couldn't help but join the ranks of the vomiting army. There were countless people who had fainted, and only a few with strong willpower could barely remain standing. Obviously, Kurga's breast was one of the best. Although his face was a little pale, he still wielded 2 short swords in his hands. He used the narrow tunnel to dodge the sharp claws and fangs, while taking advantage of the moment when the bearhound's attack ended to launch a counterattack, trying to stall for time. Without a doubt, this guy had held his breath the moment the poisonous gas spread. His pale face was one of the signs of lack of oxygen in his body. If there was enough time, Andre would have liked to see how long he could hold it in. Unfortunately, he had to end the battle quickly. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if the guards outside blocked the tunnel. Without any hesitation, Andre activated the short-distance teleportation stored in his ring. In less than a second, he suddenly appeared behind Kyrgyzstan and grabbed his neck. White electric arcs instantly released from his fingertips, producing crackling sounds. Then Kyrgyzstan's body twitched nonstop. Accompanied by miserable howls, large amounts of water appeared between Kyrgyz's legs in just a few seconds. He had obviously lost control of his bladder. Seeing this, Andre immediately revealed a playful smile. He stared into the other party's eyes and mocked. How does it feel to wet your pants, my dear Marquis? Remember, this is just a greeting. I hope that through this lesson, you'll understand that there are some people you can't provoke, or you'll have to pay a terrible price. Wizard, don't think that I can't recognize you just because you're masked. Kyrgyz said through gritted teeth. Upon hearing this, Andre suddenly burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. So what if he recognized her? Evidence. Do you have any proof? Unfortunately, he didn't. All right, don't be so nervous. I'm just here to say hello. I don't intend to take your life, so just lie down for a while. After saying that, he abruptly increased the output of the electric current, and in the blink of an eye, Kyrgyzstan's eyes rolled back. On the other side, the two bear hounds overturned the last person who was desperately resisting. They forcefully tore apart the iron cage and rescued their children. In front of the sharp teeth that were comparable to magical weapons, ordinary steel was nothing. Coupled with their terrifying biting force, it was a piece of cake for them to take down a metal bar that was as thick as a finger. After successfully rescuing him, the female beast picked up the wailing little guy in her mouth and ran towards the exit without saying a word. In an instant, the hall on the first floor was filled with screams and chaos. Human, thank you for your help today. If you have the chance, come to the forest as a guest. I will use the best way to treat you. See you again. After saying this, the male beast also rushed out and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. You have completed the mission. Help the bearhounds rescue their young children. Difficulty identified. Above average. Congratulations, you have received 6,000 experience points from a mission. Randomly selected a magical beast cub or egg. Congratulations, you have received a swamp hunting cat cub. When this creature reaches adulthood, it will possess blur, stun, demon fire, illuminate, and other spell-like abilities. Currently unallocated experience points. 33,300. In an instant, a kitten with incomparably large claws, a pitifully small head, a very short tail, and olive green fur appeared in Andre's hands. He chuckled as he stroked the kitten's head and carefully put it into his waist pouch. He muttered to himself, first, it's creating objects out of thin air, and now it's creating creatures out of thin air. This indescribable tattoo really gives people an unfathomable feeling. But it should be about time. I should also retreat. After saying that, he threw the half-dead Kyrgyz to the ground and leaped up, grabbing the last golden idol and covering it with his cloak. Once again, he activated instant teleportation and left the stinking tunnel with a whoosh. As soon as he left, the magical barrier at the back of his feet was activated. The poisonous gas that filled the air was cleaned up in just a few seconds, and the stairs at the entrance were also completely sealed by an invisible force wall. It was basically impossible to get out. Fortunately, Andre was already prepared. With a glance, he found old George, who was waiting for him not far away, and used short-distance teleportation. Due to the sudden appearance of the two bear hounds, the entire hall on the first floor was in a mess, so the scene looked abnormally chaotic. Everyone was nervously discussing what had just happened, and no one noticed that there was an extra person in the hall. How is it? Did you succeed? Old George asked in a low voice. He looked even more nervous than Andre, who had done the deed himself. His eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, as if afraid that someone would discover something. Of course, I guarantee that Kyrgyz breast won't have the face to see anyone for a few days. After saying that, Andre's face revealed a mischievous smile, and he lightly patted the spoils of war hidden under his cloak. One must know that to nobles, their reputation was more important than anything else. Today, this blood marquis had his valuable auction item snatched away in front of his face, and then lost control of his bladder. The so-called dignity of a noble was completely thrown away. Not to mention that he didn't have any evidence. Even if he did, he wouldn't say it out loud. He would only silently remember it in his heart and find an opportunity to take revenge in the future. Perhaps it sounded inconceivable, but this was the rule between nobles. Anyone who went through the legal process would be seen as a spineless coward without dignity, and would be despised and spurned by the entire class. In fact, the law had always been a tool used by the upper class to restrain the lower class. It had no effect on those who were truly in power. They could easily use many methods to avoid the legal process and achieve the goal of being exempted from punishment. They could even make a false countercharge. This was no exception even in the highly developed 21st century of Earth. Chapter 336. When old George heard that his rival had suffered a big loss, he immediately licked his dry lips, and a sinister smile appeared in his eyes. Well done. Although I really want to wait here to see Kyrgyzstan's wonderful expression, for safety's sake, it's better for us to leave first. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. Carrying such a heavy golden idol is too heavy. I can't hold on for long. Strength and endurance had never been Andrei's strong points, especially the former, which was even worse than an ordinary adult. After carrying around 25 kilograms of gold for only a few minutes, his arms felt sore and numb, and he estimated that he would reach his limit in a while. My carriage is parked outside. It's the black one. Let's celebrate after we get on the carriage. Old George took a deep breath and walked in front to lead the way. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Andrei felt that old George seemed to be a few years younger, especially the smile on his face, which looked so lascivious, as if he was an old whore master who had just walked out of a brothel, his whole body exuding a feeling of satisfaction. As soon as the two of them walked out of the gate, the guards hired by the auction house rushed out from all directions, completely blocking the passage. Not long after, a middle-aged man walked out of the crowd and carefully examined the footprints on the ground. His eyes revealed a trace of seriousness, and he muttered to himself, "Damn it, it really is a bear hound. I hope the people inside are okay. Otherwise, we'll be in big trouble. Jeff, we can't bear this responsibility. We need a scapegoat." Another man stood up and suggested very seriously, "Scapegoat?" The middle-aged man called Jeff smiled bitterly and sighed. "Sigh, you're really sinister. Then let's push the responsibility to the mercenary group that caught the bearhound cubs. Anyway, they're all outsiders, and they don't have any background or foundation in this city." A few minutes later, the two people carrying the stolen goods passed through the gate and escaped from this troublesome place without attracting the attention of the guards. Of course, no one would have thought that a potion master with a promising future and a famous count would do such a thing. Why would they do something as crazy as looting a burning house? A map of the Wizard Tower from 700 years ago. A section of the core of the lava tree. A golden statue that can cast divine spells. 10 rubies the size of fingernails. A ring with a seal. I remember this was taken from Brest of Kyrgyzstan. There are a few more here. Sitting in the carriage, Andrei counted the spoils of war one by one. Among them, there were a few expensive items for the finale of the auction, as well as some small items that he had taken from the other party. There were about a dozen items in total, and they were all piled up on the table in the carriage. In fact, he didn't think too much when he did it. He was just out of habit to take things that were valuable. He didn't think that doing so would bring about such serious consequences. Old George's mouth was wide open in shock. He carefully checked the few seal rings and sighed incoherently. Oh, my God. This was the family heirloom of the Kyrgyz family, a symbol of their supreme status in the family. There was also the ring of the Bernard family, the Reed family, the Perry family. Gods above, you've really done something earth-shattering. However, I suggest that you exchange these things for ransom. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait for the other party's fury. For nobles, the seal ring not only symbolized power, status, and identity, but also had a certain legal significance. They would carry it with them wherever they went, and it would be unthinkable if they lost it. If they found out that their seal ring had been taken away by someone or an organization, they would immediately think of a way to redeem it, even at the expense of launching a private noble war. It was obvious that Andrei had unintentionally touched a very sensitive nerve. Old George didn't really want to fall out with him, so he suggested that they settle this matter privately with ransom. After all, the environment of Lincoln City had been united against external forces recently, so fighting had to be controlled within a certain range. Otherwise, they would immediately be suppressed by the four dukes. It was better to quit while they were ahead. Andre shrugged innocently, whatever. Just remember to give me 2/3 of the ransom. Also, I have a use for the lava tree core and the gem. You can choose from the map and the golden idol to take away. Forget about the map. I don't have the ability to explore a wizard tower from hundreds of years ago. Why don't I choose the golden idol? Saying that, old George picked up the golden idol that weighed about 25 kilograms, his eyes revealing excitement and greed. He had seen with his own eyes how crazed this treasure had been at the auction. Now that it was finally in his hands, and he hadn't spent a single copper coin, was there anything more worth being happy about in the world? All right then, the idol is yours, and the map is mine. This way, we're even. But one last reminder, the Church of the Goddess of Dawn has their eyes on this thing. You better find a safe place to hide it. Otherwise, it will attract big trouble sooner or later. Although the value of the golden idol was very high, it was too eye-catching. In Andre's opinion, it was far less useful than the map of the Wizard Tower. This was because he didn't have the confidence to quietly exchange such an expensive item for gold coins or other items of equal value. To a certain extent, this thing was equivalent to a hot potato. Unless it was hidden away and never seen the light of day, it would not take long for the source to be found once it appeared in the market. Old George obviously understood this as well. He laughed heartily and promised, "Don't worry, it will be locked in the family's vault as a precious collection. Perhaps it will only be taken out in the generation of my grandson's grandson. When that time comes, I'm afraid no one in this city will remember the origin of this idol." Grandson's grandson? The corner of Andre's mouth twitched slightly. Then he smiled bitterly and teased, "That will take at least 50 years. Whether you can survive is still a problem. You're really farsighted." Feeling the warm energy emitted by the idol, old George took a deep breath and explained, "In order to ensure the prosperity and continuation of the family, this is the most basic of the basics. I have to try my best to leave some wealth for my descendants to prevent various unfavorable situations. You have to know that it's inevitable that there will be 1 or 2 generations of mediocre people in any family. When they're in power, it usually means that the family will usher in a period of decline. Only with enough financial support can the family survive safely." Chapter 337. On the contrary, I feel that it is precisely because parents like you continue to accumulate wealth that the phenomenon of the descendants becoming more and more mediocre. The reason is simple. They don't have to worry about starving to death or dying of thirst when they're born, nor do they have to worry about having no clothes to wear or a house to live in. They can get almost anything they want. In short, humans need to have a sense of danger to continue moving forward. Once there is no pressure to survive, they will naturally relax. Andre had never agreed with the cliched thinking of the nobles, so he was not polite in his evaluation. There is an old saying, "Born of worry, die of ease." When a person's physiological needs were all satisfied, they would lose their spirit and turn to the pursuit of excitement and enjoy the beauty of life. However, if a person was in an extremely harsh environment, then he would do his best to obtain all kinds of resources necessary for survival. For this, he could even unleash power beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Andre himself had the deepest understanding of this point. In his previous life, he was basically an ordinary person who had never even killed a chicken. Not to mention hunting, even a number of times he exercised was pitifully little. He would be out of breath after running a few hundred meters for business. His biggest hobby every day was playing games, watching movies, TV shows, anime, and the like as a pastime after work. But what about after transmigrating? He was forced to struggle to survive in the wild, where the temperature was more than 20 degrees below zero. In just a few days, he learned how to make a fire, fish, dig traps, hunt, and so on. In the end, he forcibly brought a group of half-grown children to survive an entire winter in the Black Forest that was said to be absolutely uninhabitable for humans. If it was in the past, this was simply unimaginable, but he did it, and did it very well. Even the most experienced hunter in Lonely Mountain Town thought it was a miracle, and that he must have been blessed by the gods. Old George looked a little helpless after hearing this. After a full minute, he shook his head lightly. Perhaps what you said makes sense, but it does not fit the current situation of the noble family. After thousands of years of settling, we have formed a set of survival, reproduction, development, and strengthening systems. Very few people can jump out, and very few people have the courage to break the rules. At least, I don't have the courage. But thank you for your reminder. I think I need to train the younger generation well. I hope they don't hate me for it. That's all for today. Remember to help me get some fresh blood from the lady who never ages. Also, contact the mercenary group that catches bear and hound cubs. After saying that, Andre reached out to open the car door. Ever since he completed the quest, he couldn't wait to find a place to level up. Moreover, he had almost gathered all the materials for the fireball staff. He only lacked the bones of large magical beasts. Perhaps he could purchase them from places frequented by adventurers. No problem. Give me a few days. I'll get back to you in 2 weeks at the latest. Old George covered the golden statue with a cloak and waved his hand with a smile. Andre didn't talk nonsense. He just nodded and jumped out of the car. He walked in the direction of the North City district. Not long after, he entered a sparsely populated alley. Are you sure you want to allocate 29,000 EXP to the mage class? Confirm. Your mage level has increased to level 8. You've received a basic attribute point. Your magic pet's level has increased to 8. You have used up a basic attribute point and chose to add it to intelligence. Name, Andrew race, fire elemental descendant, bloodline purity level 2, alignment, neutral good, moving towards absolute neutral. Attributes, strength, 7 agility, 17 vitality, 10 intelligence, 22 perception, 12 charm, 9 profession. Mage level 8 experience required to level up, 59,000/109000 number of memorizable arcane spells. Level 0 for level 1, 6 level 2, 5 level 3. For +1, effective mage badge. Level 4, 3+1, effective mage badge. Health points, 3434. Healthy experience points, 4,300 undistributed. You are wearing a magic equipment with a constant voice spell. Therefore, you are immune to all silent spells. Magic pet information name, small eyes race. Small eyes, magic creature, alignment. Neutral evil profession. Magic pet level 8. This creature's level increases as the master's mage level increases. Strength, 8 agility, 18 vitality, 9 intelligence, 6 perception, 10 charm, 12 health points. 3131. Healthy, special abilities. Cold ray, 24 per day. Damage ray, 8 per day. With a large amount of information and numbers appearing on his retina, Andre finally completed the level up he had been looking forward to. Not only did his spell slots increase by a lot, even Small Eye's trump card, the damage ray, had increased from 6 to 8. Even the strongest knight of Lincoln City, Ansonair, would be seriously injured if he were to receive all of them, or even die. Apart from that, his intelligence had also increased. His brain felt as if it had been injected with a clear spring, and his thoughts became clearer. The level 4 arcane spells that had been difficult to remember seemed to have become much easier in an instant. Feeling the surging magic energy in his body, Andre's lips curled up slightly, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. He was very clear that he only needed to level up once more, and he would be able to break away from the level of a mid-level mage and stride towards the level of a great mage. A level 9 mage could learn level 5 arcane spells. This meant that after learning the teleportation spell, he could directly teleport back to his hometown and see the family and friends that he missed day and night, as well as the beautiful female knight that he had an intimate relationship with. However, Andre was very clear that he could only think about it in his head for now. Unless he waited for the game to end, he could not leave so easily. Even if he waited for the game to end, whether he would use the teleportation spell to return home was still a question mark. After all, the danger level of teleportation was rather high. Generally speaking, if he was not in a hurry, it was best not to use it. It would not be too late to enjoy magical travel after learning more advanced teleportation spells. That way, he would not have to worry about falling to his death or getting stuck in between rocks, unable to move forward or backward. I really didn't expect that in just a few months, I would go from an ordinary person to a level 8 mage with great power. Looks like this tattoo is really unusual. Andre sighed silently as he lowered his head to glance at the pattern on the back of his left hand. He found that after leveling up, the eyes seemed to have opened a little more. He could already see a little violet in the eyeball, as if it was nurturing something. Chapter 338. Meow, meow, meow. Just as Andre lowered his head and was deep in thought, he suddenly heard a weak meow. He looked down and saw that the kitten in his pocket had revealed its furry head. It stared at him with its two big, dark green eyes and made a coquettish sound with an innocent face. He didn't know if it was hungry or bored, so wanted to find someone to play with. He sighed slightly, grabbed the kitten's neck, and put it on his shoulder to comfort it. He muttered to himself helplessly, "Sigh, what a troublesome little thing. When I go back, I'll give it to Chloe or Beverly to take care of." Although the swamp hunting cat was called a cat, it was actually a large feline with a similar body size to leopards and tigers. It was also a dangerous magical beast. When it reached adulthood, its body length, including its tail, could reach more than 3 meters. Although its head was relatively small, so its bite force was not strong enough, its claws were huge and even stronger than a bear's paw. It could easily tear the scales on a crocodile. In addition, this animal was also very smart. It could understand almost all languages. Its wide feet allowed it to run on dangerous swamps without worrying about getting stuck in the mud. Of course, the main reason why Andre didn't want to raise it himself was that he hated the capricious nature of cats. Compared to a cat that liked to act coquettishly, he preferred dogs that were loyal to their owners. After all, the latter could almost unconditionally carry out any order, but the former depended on its mood. It might even go on strike. If that happened, you wouldn't even be able to cry. The young swamp hunting cat obviously didn't know that it was about to be given away. After climbing on his shoulder, it rubbed its head against Andre's neck very intimately. Then it looked around curiously. With the help of its huge claws, it lay quite steadily. When it walked, it almost didn't cause any bumps. Other than its short tail, it was basically no different from an adult domestic cat. Seeing that the kitten had finally calmed down, Andre ignored it. After confirming the location of the room, he walked towards the place called the Adventurers Inn in the city. According to the information he received, it was the only stronghold of the adventurers in this city. It was responsible for accepting commissions, issuing missions, exchanging information, recruiting teammates, eating, lodging, selling spoils, and so on. It was equivalent to a loose alliance. From the nobles to the commoners, as long as they could pay the entrance fee of 1 silver coin, they could enter and leave freely. In this world, there was no such thing as an adventurer's guild, a mage's guild, or a warrior's guild. Not to mention how much gold was needed to maintain such a huge organization, and how to prevent independence. Due to the inconvenience of communication and transportation, the rulers would not allow such a powerful force to take root in their territory. So, most of the time, experienced adventurers would take the lead and open a hotel, bar, or other institutions to take care of the daily needs. This was just like any independent country on Earth with a strong sense of sovereignty. It was difficult for them to allow armed forces that did not belong to their country to be stationed within their borders for a long time. The nobles of Orire were not fools. How could they sit and watch a force that could shake their foundation rise? So, most of the adventurers were very territorial. Generally, after determining the scope of their activities, they would accept commissions and earn rewards in the surrounding towns and cities for the rest of their lives. There were 2 advantages to doing this. On one hand, they could be familiar with the surrounding environment to the maximum extent. They knew the monsters and robbers in the wild like the back of their hands. They would know which way to escape in times of danger, and the chances of survival would be higher. On the other hand, it was convenient for them to make a name for themselves. As long as they had a reputation, not only could they get more missions with better rewards, but they might even be chosen by the local rulers and get a good job as an officer or an advisor to the nobles. In addition to providing necessary services, the adventurers was also responsible for a small number of retired or disabled people, so that they could have a job and not become beggars on the streets. However, not everyone could enjoy this kind of treatment. Generally speaking, most of the people who could be taken care of were experienced veterans. Even if these people were disabled, they could still help others with the wilderness knowledge that they had accumulated over the years. Walking along the dark and quiet path, Andre soon found the legendary inn in the corner of the northern city. It was located less than 300 meters away from the city gate. It was a 4-story brick building that covered a large area of more than 1,000 square meters. Although it looked a little dirty, the business was very good. Even if he was dozens of meters away, he could still hear the noise inside. Unlike other places of business, there was no sign at the door. There was only a shield covered with dust and 2 long swords that were crossed over each other, hanging above the door. A man in his early 40s, who only had one arm left, was guarding the door. Every person who entered would give him a silver coin. Those who were better dressed would even choose to give him an extra coin. Then, they would lower their heads and say a few words to him. It looks very interesting and full of magical style. Chapter 339. Genuine Alliance Gold Coins. Full of quality. I haven't received them for many years since I was injured and retired. You have received the money now. Can you answer my question? Andre asked calmly. Of course. Animal bones and the like are sold at the bar on the first floor. I just don't know if there are any large magical beast bones you want. After all, these things have always been quite rare. As for the people who are familiar with the terrain of the Western Mountains, there are too many monsters there. Few adventurers dare to go deep. But I heard that a guy named Ian Annell once went in for a week for a high reward. If you want to find him, go to the last room on the right on the 2nd floor. Finally, I'd like to remind you that Ian Annell's temper is a bit strange. He may go crazy at any time. You'd better be careful. After that, Barnard opened his mouth and showed a meaningful smile, as if he was hinting at something. Andre didn't like his expression at the moment. He frowned subconsciously, opened the door, and walked into the noisy hotel without saying a word. As soon as he entered the door, he was instantly pushed out by a pungent smell of alcohol, smoke, and vomit. He coughed and cried, which made Barnard laugh. Cough, cough, cough. Damn it. I bet those guys inside will die of lung cancer sooner or later. Andre took a few deep breaths, gritted his teeth, and cursed in a low voice. As a person with a slight obsession with cleanliness, he couldn't imagine how bad the air inside was. It was comparable to the poisonous gas discharged from a chemical factory, especially the smoke produced by the burning of inferior tobacco, which shrouded the whole inside with a layer of gray fog. Even the kitten lying on his shoulder kept sneezing and rubbing its nose with its front paws. It looked like it was heavily smothered. However, despite the terrible air, Andre had no choice but to brace himself and walk in. After all, he had a very strong purpose in coming here today. On one hand, he wanted to obtain the last main material to make the fireball wand. On the other hand, he wanted to ask about the map and find some time to explore the ancient mage tower. But just as he was about to push the door open again, the swamp hunting cat refused to let him in. It bared its teeth and meowed in protest. Its 2 paws grabbed onto the wooden fence and refused to let him in. With no other choice, Andre could only coax her with a bitter smile. All right, don't complain. Bear with it. You know, we have to go in today, no matter what. How about this? I promise to get you a milk or goat's milk when we get in. How about that? Meow. As soon as the kitten heard that there was food, its eyes lit up instantly. Its short tail swayed back and forth as if it was asking, "Are you lying to me? I swear, the first thing I'll do when we get in is to get you a milk or goat's milk." Andre promised without hesitation. He finally understood how intelligent the swamp hunting cat was. It was still a little kitten that hadn't been weaned, but it could understand the human language perfectly. No wonder it could understand almost all the languages of other races when it grew up. Other than the fact that it couldn't open its mouth to speak, it was basically no different from an adult. Meow, meow. Seeing that its request was met, the kitten meowed twice and retracted its paws. It obediently returned to his shoulder and carefully covered its nose with its cloak, showing an obedient look. Staring at this clever and strange little thing, Andre couldn't help but gently rub his eyebrows. He then took a deep breath, held his breath, and quickly pushed open the door and rushed into the smoky Adventurers Inn. The atmosphere in the Adventurers Inn was basically the same as the shabby look from the outside and the noisy sound from the outside. In this building, the first floor was a large room. There was a long bar defensively set up in the innermost corner, directly opposite the door. Next to the bar, there was a staircase that led directly to the second floor. Two drunken fellows were lying on the staircase, snoring loudly. The people who used the bar most often weren't regular customers, but women with heavy makeup and excessive perfume and their latest partners. These women were mostly scantily dressed and looked haggard. They used the most primitive methods to attract the attention of men with excessive hormone secretion, and then used their bodies in exchange for a generous reward. Other than that, the largest number of people in the room were adventurers who were yelling at the top of their lungs, as well as drunkards who weren't very sober. In the corner, two naked men were competing in arm wrestling, and many people around them were cheering for them. No matter what, this was a place full of all kinds of sounds, colors, and smells, especially the disgusting smell of alcohol, which permeated every corner. Regardless of whether it came from ale, cheap fruit wine, or rare spirits, they were all things that Andre hated the most. A small number of relatively wealthy adventurers were constantly puffing tobacco from overseas continents, blurring the harsh reality into a dreamlike feeling. This kind of expensive luxury item cost 10 to 15 gold coins per kilogram, and the best even cost 50 gold coins. Ordinary people couldn't afford to smoke it at all. At this moment, those who were holding hookahs didn't look simple. Whether it was their weapons or armor, they were far superior to the others. Obviously, after walking on the edge of life and death for so many years, even the most tenacious nerves needed to be relaxed. And the scene in front of him was just the right time for the adventurers to release their pressure and vent the fear hidden in their hearts. Carefully avoiding the drunkards who were lying on the floor and talking nonsense, Andre finally squeezed to the front of the bar. He took out a gold coin and threw it to the bartender, shouting loudly, "Give me a cup of milk. Milk or goat's milk will do." As the environment was too noisy, he could only use his maximum volume. Otherwise, even if they were less than a meter apart, it would be difficult for the bartender to hear what he said clearly. "Milk? Damn it. I only sell food and wine here." The bartender roared with a ferocious expression after catching the gold coin. "Ah, kid, if you want to drink milk, go home and find your mother. That's right. This is a place where only men can come. If you're a man, come and have a drink. Hee hee. Don't tell me you're a woman." For a moment, a few burly men around him, under the influence of alcohol, began to unscrupulously mock him. All kinds of obscenities were incessant, and in the end, even the scantily clad women joined in. The scene suddenly became chaotic. Chapter 340. Andre, whose nerves were already so strong that he could not be affected by external factors, did not care about this small scene at all. He merely smiled contemptuously and waved a finger in front of his eyes. "Don't find excuses. I know you must have some here. Take it out before I get angry. And you trash better shut your mouths and disappear from my sight. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as a verbal warning." As soon as he finished speaking, white electric arcs suddenly shot out from between his fingers, so blinding that they could not open their eyes. Although it was not fatal, everyone who saw this scene subconsciously shut their mouths, especially those who had spoken rudely just now. They turned around and ran without saying a word, afraid that they would be retaliated against if they were too slow. Silence. Very silence. To be exact, it was absolute silence. The originally noisy room seemed to have been cast with a silencing spell. A few drunken fellows immediately shuddered and sobered up within a few seconds. In Lincoln City, everyone knew what a mage meant. They also knew what privileges they had, which was why none of them dared to take the initiative to look for trouble. They couldn't even hide. In the blink of an eye, the crowded first floor of the Adventurers became empty. More than half of the people realized that the situation was not good, and all of them had quietly run away. Most of the remaining people were very confident in their skills, and were not worried about being accidentally injured by the mysterious spell. The bartender obviously realized what a huge mistake he had made. He hurriedly wiped the sweat off his forehead and explained with a bitter smile, "I'm sorry, Mr. Mage. I'm not lying. We really don't have the milk or goat's milk you want here. The only dairy product is yogurt." Yogurt? Andre frowned slightly and turned his head to glance at the kitten on his shoulder, secretly wondering if it was okay to give it yogurt. After all, the yogurt that the bartender was talking about was completely different from the yogurt that was industrially produced in his previous life. The former was a dairy product that was similar to dregs obtained through primitive fermentation methods. It contained all kinds of bacteria. Although it would theoretically not cause any discomfort after drinking it when it was hot and was beneficial to the body, he was not sure if such a small swamp hunting cat could withstand it. As for the latter, after a series of industrial processes and then sealed and packaged, the harmful bacteria had been mostly eliminated. Therefore, whether it was the color or the taste, it was far better than the former. Meow? The kitten tilted its head and meowed as if it was asking, "What are you looking at? Where's my food?" In any case, it's a magical beast, so it should probably not have any problems, Andre muttered uncertainly. He then immediately said to the bartender, "Then give my pet a yogurt and a glass of juice for me." "Okay, please wait a moment." The bartender bowed respectfully and quickly took out a sealed clay jar from under the bar counter. He poured some yogurt that contained a lot of impurities, especially the pale yellow milk residue, which looked very unappetizing. However, the kitten was quite interested in this kind of food. It jumped lightly onto the bar counter, raised its nose, and sniffed cautiously. Then, it stuck out its tongue and licked the yogurt on the plate, making bursts of cheerful cries. There was no doubt that it liked the sour-tasting food. It was so happy that its tail was wagging. Perhaps it was due to the unique body structure of a swamp hunting cat. The bartender took a few more glances at it before pouring a cup of coconut juice from another jar and handing it over. "Your juice." "Thank you." Andre thanked him and took a small sip. He then asked softly, "I need the bones of a large magical beast. It's best if it's a stick bone that's about a foot long. Do you have any here?" "A large magical beast? I think I'll have to check the records." The bartender took out the account book behind him and flipped through it. After a full 5 minutes, he raised his head and spread his hands helplessly. "Sorry, the last one was sold 3 days ago. I only have the bones of some small magical beasts and a few live ash rats. If you need them, you can buy some." After saying that, he pointed to a row of iron cages hanging in the air behind him. Inside the cages were 7 or 8 rats with black smoke and fire all over their bodies. Including their tails, they were about 50 to 60 centimeters long. Their eyes were orange-red and constantly emitted a high temperature. Even the iron bars around the cages were a little red from the heat. "These are ash rats? Why are they hanging in the air?" Andre asked curiously. He had never read about such creatures in the monster encyclopedia, especially the fire that constantly emitted from their bodies. It fully proved that these rats had a considerable degree of fire element characteristics. That's right, these annoying little things are ash rats. Don't be fooled by their small size, but their destructive power is not small at all. They have the supernatural ability to spit fire, and as long as they are bathed in fire, no matter how serious the injury is, it can be healed in a few seconds. In addition, these damn pests are natural arsonists. Once they appear in a forest or town, they will immediately cause a big fire. The consequences are far more terrible than arson. In the mountains west of Lincoln City, There's a volcano that has been dormant for thousands of years. The ash rats live there. These cages were caught by Ian Annell after he completed his task. He was the only person who could go deep into the volcano within a radius of tens of kilometers, but he was not very smart. There are a total of 9 ash rats in the cages. Each one is 50 gold coins, and it's only 400 gold coins to pack them all. How about it? Are you interested? Perhaps it was because the bartender wanted to sell all the rats hanging above his head as soon as possible, but he did not hide anything from him. He was just short of kneeling down and begging to buy these dangerous creatures. Staring at the bartender's crying face, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a trace of playfulness. He knew very well why the bartender was making such an expression. If these ash rats accidentally escaped, half of Lincoln City could be engulfed in a sea of fire. After all, more than 50% of the houses in the city were made of wood. In addition, the rats themselves were relatively small and difficult to detect, so there was no way to stop the fire from spreading. When the time came, the losses would be astronomical. The furious dukes and nobles would definitely rush up and raze this adventurers into the ground. However, Andre was indeed very interested in these rats, so after a slight hesitation, he nodded. Chapter 341. I'm a little interested. As long as you can help me with 2 things, I'll buy all the ash rats. First, I want a large magic beast bone immediately. Don't say you can't do it. I believe you must have some special channels to get it. Second, I want to talk to this person called Ian Annell. How about it? Can you agree? Oh, God, you've really given me a difficult problem. All right, I'll give it a try, but you better be mentally prepared. I'm afraid the price will be twice as expensive. After saying that, the bartender patted his head with a bitter face. Then he jumped out of the bar and went straight to the table in the right corner. There was an old man with an eye patch sitting there. He wasn't drunk like those drunkards, nor was he like other adventurers who went looking for women to have fun. He just sat there motionless. There was nothing on the table except for a glass of water. Hey, Blanche, you should have heard what I said just now, right? If you have any stock, then quickly take it out. I know you never disappoint people. The bartender slammed the table and shouted at the old man. From his attitude, it could be seen that the two of them knew each other. Their relationship was much better than it seemed on the surface. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spoken in such a tone. The old man called Blanche blinked his eyes and suddenly burst into laughter. Ha ha, I knew there would be a big business today. Large magic beast bone, right? I do have some stock here. 3,000 gold coins per bone, no bargaining. In addition, you have to treat me to a glass of the most expensive Shemin ruby wine here. Damn it, you bastard who takes advantage of a burning house. I curse you that sooner or later you will be caught by the tax officials in the city and thrown into prison. The bartender was obviously very angry. He gritted his teeth and cursed. In the end, he even cursed. Shemin ruby wine was produced from a wine called Shemin City in the south. It was said that it was brewed through a special process. It was dark red and had a slightly sour taste. When it was in the mouth, it would stimulate the taste buds and give people an incomparable sense of pleasure. Therefore, the price was so expensive that most people couldn't afford it. A small barrel cost more than 50 gold coins. As a kind of wine, its price was a bit outrageous. Hee hee. It's not like you don't know that the prison warden has already been bribed. Even if I'm caught, I'll be released in less than an hour. All right, hurry up and pour me some wine. I've been drinking plain water all day. My taste buds are getting bland. While speaking, Branch licked his lips with a smile. That smug look on his face was infuriating. Old fox. Bah. After spitting fiercely, the bartender turned back to the bar counter and shrugged helplessly. I believe you've heard it. 3,000 gold coins is non-negotiable. Furthermore, I only want cash or other items of equivalent value. I don't accept things like money orders. It was the first time that Andre had heard of such a rule. He raised his eyebrows subconsciously. No money orders? Why? That's because this is a black market transaction. In order to avoid those omnipresent tax officials, they have to minimize the transaction procedures as much as possible. However, Every bill of exchange is entered into the account. It's very easy to be found out, the bartender explained very patiently. No wonder they only accept cash. So it's smuggling and the black market. Andre's face showed an expression of sudden realization. As the name implied, the black market referred to those illegal trading markets that weren't approved by the local rulers. They traded contraband, valuable goods, and even people for profit. Because they never paid taxes, they were always seen as a malignant tumor by the local authorities. They wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible. But it was a pity that where there was light, there would be shadows. Similarly, as long as there was a need, the black market would never be banned. Andre didn't care if the other party's purchase channels and sales methods were legal or not. He also didn't care if the price was twice as high. He only cared if he could get a qualified product. After all, compared to the Fireball magic wand, a mere 3,000 gold coins was nothing. The bartender quickly filled up a glass of dark, red, Shemin ruby wine. Then, he lowered his voice and said, "Please follow me. Whether the transaction is successful or not depends on your ability to pay." Don't worry. Although I don't have that many gold coins on me, but I can still take out items of equivalent value. After saying that, Andre let out a relaxed smile and followed the bartender to a table in the right corner. He had just robbed the pro-war nobles led by the Blood Marquis, Kyrgyz Brester, about an hour ago. Just the pouches of money that he had taken along the way added up to more than 1,000 gold coins. Coupled with the magic potions that he had brought along with him, it was no problem for him to gather 3,000 gold coins. "Here, Shemin ruby wine. Take your time. I still have work to do." After the bartender put down the glass, he turned around and left without hesitation. He was only responsible for pulling the strings and didn't want to know too much about the rest. Blanche, whose face was full of vicissitudes of life, picked up the glass and took a sip. Then, he closed his eyes as if he was savoring the wonderful taste. After a full minute, he reluctantly swallowed the wine. When he opened his eyes again, he exclaimed in an intoxicated manner, "What a delicacy! If I could drink a glass every day from now on, I would rather die and fall into the abyss. By the way, how should I address you, dear Mr. Mage?" A name is just a code name anyway. Just call me Magic Eye." Andre pretended to be mysterious as he replied. Even though he didn't get the answer he wanted, Blanche didn't mind at all. Instead, he smiled and spread out his hands. Another buyer who doesn't want to reveal his identity. Don't worry, 9 out of 10 people who come to the black market won't choose to hide their identity. After all, everyone has their own secrets. I can understand this. But before we make the transaction, I need to confirm your ability to pay. Please show me 3,000 gold coins or other items of equivalent value. No problem. I have 1,300 gold coins in cash, a ring that can cast magic missiles, and lastly, a bottle of invisibility potion and a bottle of minor healing potion. I believe these items are worth 3,000 gold coins. With regard to the old man's request, Andre had already expected it. He directly threw the money bags tied to his belt onto the table and took out 2 bottles of potions from his waist pouch. Finally, he took off the magic ring on his right index finger. This magic missile ring, made of pure silver, was a little outdated for a grade 8 mage like him. He could use it as a bargaining chip and forge a better one when he returned. Chapter 342. Oh, magical potions. Magical items. I love these cute little treasures. Please wait for a few minutes. I think I need some time to appraise them. Blanche spoke quickly as he excitedly took out a pair of spectacles from his pocket and put them on his nose. He carefully observed the magical patterns on the ring and the faint glow from the 2 potions. As a black market merchant, he was very clear about how popular magic items were in the market, especially those that couldn't be exposed to the public. It wouldn't be strange even if they were sold for more than 5 times the price. Therefore, he was extremely excited, and his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Seeing this scene, Andre couldn't help but laugh. He held his chin and waited quietly. He was slowly getting used to the fanaticism and obsession of the inhabitants of this world towards magical items. Some of them were even willing to pay with their lives for it. But it wasn't surprising. Even a transmigrator like him, with a brain full of theoretical knowledge, couldn't help but be deeply attracted. He wanted to understand the mysteries behind the countless mysterious spells, not to mention a group of primitive people whose thoughts and consciousness were still stuck in the age of ignorance. The only difference was that he paid more attention to the essence behind the power of magic. As a user, he blindly pursued quantity, variety, and destructive power. He didn't consider the operating principles of magic, nor the origin of magic. The inspection lasted for a full 10 minutes. When Blanche confirmed the authenticity of the ring and the 2 potions, he wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth with a satisfied expression. Excellent. That's a pretty good item. I'm more than happy to accept it. How about this? I'll give you 1,500 gold coins for the ring and 350 gold coins for the 2 potions. You'll only need to pay 800 gold coins in the end. Also, if you have any needs in the future, or if you intend to sell magical items or potions, please consider me first. I promise to give you a price that's 20% higher than the market price. Oh, 20%? That sounds pretty good. I'll consider it. Also, since you've verified my ability to pay, shouldn't you take out the bones of the large magical creatures for me to verify? As he spoke, Andre split all the money bags on the table into 2, indicating for Blanche to take out the items he wanted. He knew very well what kind of people the black market merchants were, so he didn't dare to overestimate the credibility of this old man in front of him. His eyes were full of vigilance. In fact, black market merchants had no credibility at all. They cheated, sold shoddy goods, took advantage of the situation, and so on. When necessary, they would even turn into bandits and rob the customers who came to trade. In short, it wasn't strange that they would do something so risky in order to pursue the greatest profit. After all, the black market was so lucrative that it was enough to trample on all laws and morals. Andre didn't want to become one of the victims. Aha, looks like you've heard the rumors. Don't worry, I'm not one of those despicable businessmen who would run away after getting a good deal. I've never done anything that would damage my reputation. Please wait here for a few minutes. I have to go to the nearby warehouse to get the goods. I'll be back soon. Blanche put the ring and potions on the table and raised his hands to show that he didn't take anything with him. He then turned around and walked out of the Adventurer's Inn, disappearing from sight in the blink of an eye. As soon as he left, the bartender came to the table and said in a low voice, "Mr. Mage, that old man will take at least 15 minutes to return. Do you think you should go and see Ian Annell first? It's rare that he's sober today. He's not drunk or crazy. It's a good opportunity to talk." Andre nodded lightly. Of course. Bring him here. After getting an affirmative answer, the bartender immediately waved to the stairs leading to the 2nd floor. Ian Annell, come here quickly. Mr. Mage wants to see you now. Remember, it's best to keep your bad temper in check and get a lucrative job. Think about your unconscious son. He has to go to the temple for treatment every once in a while. Otherwise, he'll die soon. Oh, don't worry. As long as there's enough remuneration, I'll even be a dog. As soon as he finished speaking, a middle-aged man with a height of about 1.75 meters with a full beard and a haggard face slowly walked out. He was wearing a shabby leather armor, with a broadsword twice as wide as an ordinary long sword hanging from his waist. On his back was an old hunting bow. His eyes were slightly drooping, as if he hadn't woken up yet. But if one looked carefully, one would find a pair of clear and sharp eyes hidden underneath. One of his arms was long, and the other was short. Moreover, the knuckles of his right hand's middle finger, index finger, and ring finger were abnormally thick. In addition, his spine was always arched. There was no need to ask to know that he was definitely a master archer, because to have such a body condition, one could only do so by using a strong bow for a long time. Andre rarely used a bow and arrow because he didn't want to become so deformed. Even if the speed of a bow and arrow was much faster than a crossbow, with lazy steps, Ian Annell directly came to the table and sat on the chair without any trace of politeness. He directly picked up the Sheeman ruby wine that Blanche hadn't finished and drank it all in one gulp. Then, he licked his lips as if he hadn't had enough and asked, "I heard that you wanted to see me? Say it, what's the matter?" If the remuneration is less than 500 gold coins, please don't ask. His tone was completely devoid of any respect. He didn't even bother with basic courtesy. He wasn't like the others who were full of fear towards mages. Damn it, show some respect. The person sitting in front of you is a respected mage. If you give up on a mission halfway like last time, don't expect me to introduce you to jobs in the future. The bartender's face twitched as he scolded loudly. I know, you're so long-winded. The reason why I gave up on a mission halfway last time was because there was something wrong with Little John's body. Otherwise, I wouldn't have thrown away 1,000 gold coins and rushed back in such a hurry. Ian shrugged his shoulders indifferently. From his expression, one could tell that he didn't take the warning to heart at all. As an experienced senior ranger, he had considerable confidence in himself. Even if he occasionally gave up on missions, he didn't have to worry about not having a job. After all, the whole of Linton City knew who to look for when they needed a guide. Chapter 343. Realizing that he couldn't handle this sloppy fellow, the bartender could only sigh helplessly. He turned around and explained with a wry smile, "Mr. Mage, this is Ian Annell, a level 9 ranger. In a sense, he can be considered the most outstanding adventurer in Linton City. His archery skills are especially good, and he can hit almost every shot. Don't be fooled by his unreliable appearance. His success rate is as high as 99%. The remaining 1% was forced to give up due to various unforeseen circumstances. He's easily competent as a guide or a bodyguard. Apart from that, this fellow is also good at survival and tracking in the wild. He can distinguish which beasts and monsters live within a few kilometers from the traces left on the ground. Even in the harshest environment, he can ensure the survival of his employer. If you want to explore the mountains in the west, he's the best choice." "Thank you. I think I have a rough understanding. Let's talk about the rest ourselves." Saying that, Andre took out a gold coin and stuffed it into the bartender's hand, indicating that he could leave. Because the following conversation might involve many secrets, especially the legendary wizard tower that must have stored a lot of knowledge and wealth. He didn't want too many people to know about it. After the bartender returned to the bar, Andre silently watched the ranger sitting opposite him. He felt that this fellow was very interesting. At the same time, he liked his unrestrained aura of freedom and his calm and lazy attitude. After a long time, he asked, "Ian Annell, can I trust you?" "Trust? What do you mean?" Ian was obviously confused by this sentence that didn't make any sense. He didn't understand what the other party was trying to say at all. But after all, he had seen a lot of the world and quickly realized that there might be some secret involved. His originally drooping eyelids suddenly opened and instantly released a strong aura. He stroked the thick beard on his chin and cautiously probed. "You don't want me to participate in some dangerous mission, do you? Let me make it clear first. If I find something that might threaten my life during the mission, I will turn around and run without hesitation." Andre smiled and shook his head and said in a half-joking tone, "Don't worry. If there's really danger, I don't need you to remind me. I'll be the first to turn around and run. After all, no matter how many treasures there are, they are far less important than one's life." He wasn't the kind of idiot who would sacrifice his life for money. He knew how to assess the degree of danger. At the same time, he also knew when to continue and when to give up. "All right, I feel a lot more at ease now that you've said that. As for the issue of trust, please don't worry. I've always been a tight-lipped person. I've never revealed any information about my employer or mission to anyone else." Ian promised without hesitation. From his serious eyes, it was obvious that he wasn't bluffing at all. "In that case, take a look at this map first, and give me some useful suggestions after you're done. You don't have to worry about the reward. Whether you want gold coins, magic items, potions, or scrolls of equal value, you can get them all." As he spoke, Andre took out the ancient parchment map that he had just snatched and placed it gently on the table. Then, he made a gesture of invitation. He had already seen the location marked on the map. However, as it had been more than 700 years, many places were difficult to match with the ones in the real world. Moreover, The mountains to the west of Lincoln City had always been a forbidden area for humans. So, it was as if he didn't see it at all. After a quick glance, a trace of surprise flashed across Ian's face. He carefully spread out the parchment and used his body to block the curious gazes from the other corners of the hall. Then, he carefully examined the terrain on the map with his brows furrowed. This is the Jones Canyon. This is the Sandor River. This is the Echo Peak. Next to it is the Forest of Death. As an experienced ranger, he quickly matched some of the places with the ones in his memory. Although the shapes and sizes of many places had changed after the passage of time, it was still not a problem for an expert who frequented the mountains to the west. Of course, this also had something to do with his profession. After all, a ranger was a combination of hunters, rogues, and druids. Not only were they good at using all kinds of long-range and close-range weapons, but they could also walk in the forest, wilderness, and mountains as if they were walking on flat ground. When their level reached a certain level, they could even cast some nature magic like druids. In terms of control and utilization of the environment, a ranger was much better than a druid. An experienced ranger could kill an enemy before they could discover him. As long as he wanted to, he could turn into a terrifying wild killer at any time. In a way, Andre's use of the terrain and traps to hunt in Lonely Mountain Town was a typical ranger's way of doing things. If he hadn't chosen to become a sorcerer in the end, he would have naturally become a ranger with the accumulation of knowledge and experience. After a few minutes, Ian finally finished reading the content on the map. He quickly rolled it up and put it back in the middle of the table. "Where did you get this map?" he asked in a low voice. "I just snatched it from Marquis at the end of the month's boutique auction," Andre replied with a playful look on his face. When he said snatch, he wasn't referring to the usual bidding. He was really like a bandit who had snatched it. He even beat up Kyrgyzstan Bryce while he was at it. He was really arrogant to the extreme. "Oh, looks like you got something good." Judging from the location of the markings, this once glorious wizard tower should be located inside the Whales volcano. Although it's very dangerous, it's not impossible to get close to it. I've been there to catch ash rats before, and I happen to know a path that leads inside. Ian didn't know that there was a hidden meaning in Andre's words. He continued to introduce the surrounding terrain of the wizard tower, his eyes shining with excitement. Unlike most rangers who were indifferent by nature, he seemed to have a special interest in exploring, especially when it came to the possibility that there might be a huge treasure hidden in the Mage Tower. In just a few seconds, the lazy look on his face was replaced by a greedy look. He almost took off his clothes and shouted, "Let's go explore and take all the valuables." Then, he turned into a different person. As Ora had experienced the rise and fall of countless civilizations, ancient ruins could often be found. Some people lost their lives because of it, while others became rich because of it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.